Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another competitive play tier list discussion with Vexer. Well, I guess maybe we'll talk about what the standards we're going to be using for this tier list will be. How's it going, Vexer?
Hey, hello Ben, and hello everyone. And yeah, I guess the difference with this one is it's going to be a dedicated conversation about this, and we're going to be able to go a bit more in depth because of that same thing.
Yeah, and so we decided it's not so much going to be like a part two of the previous discussion as just let's just start from scratch and let's fully go into the explanation behind each faction's power level. Let's talk about the cards briefly. And I think we were also you were also thinking it would be easier for this tier list not to talk about competitive play necessarily, just because that gets complicated talking about specific matchups and the meta and how do they do against the S tier factions, and just focus
Mhm.
on pure raw power level. Or how would you describe that? Like what are we going to be ranking here?
Yeah, exactly. So after the last time we talked, I think there were a few conversations in Discord about the implications of saying that it's just a power level or the in competitive. And if you talk about competitive, well, it opens the doors to a lot of nuisance with considerations about the matchups. Like, hey, maybe this faction is really powerful, but it has bad matchups against the three of the S tier ones, the ones that are really powerful. So then it's hard to say in competitive. It's also an S tier because it's going to be facing most of the S tiers, so you're going to have bad matchups. So then you would lower it, right? So that's the type of thing we would encounter, and we probably don't have enough data to make like a serious analysis that way on, for example, of the Grogs, right? Like I think a few of us have played like dozens of matchups with specific factions, right? We don't have like too many matchups of the Grogs versus the Cloaks, the Grogs versus Shadow Elves, the Grogs, to be able to properly analyze it that way. So it's a little bit harder to go into that, but we're going to just cover that a bit, but we're going to be focusing on just the overall power level on a per faction basis. Without focusing that much, well, actually, in great detail, we'll cover it, like how does it play against some of the different levels, but it won't be like so much like data based or super detailed on that aspect because right now there's a lot of just speculation about how some of the newer factions are going to be playing at that competitive level.
Yeah, so, sounds good. And feel free to ask questions in chat about anything where we put anything. Hopefully, it's just like an opportunity to go a little bit more in depth about like what a faction's power comes from as well, and what it means for something to be balanced.
Mhm.
And and Beans asking in chat, is this Vexer's tier list or both of yours? Both of ours. I'll sway a little bit more towards Vexer. I'll follow your own lead. But we'll be discussing. We'll try to sway each other one way or another.
Yeah, and because this thing we're going to build is not something that I have already thought out. Like the thing is, we're going to analyze them in such a way to try to make a determination on where they should be. And so we're going to just take it as we go. The thing here is first we have to define what's going to be the basis for this analysis. And it's not going to really be something based on like my preferences or emotion or how I feel about this deck or this other deck. I want to make it a little bit more objective from the perspective of taking the designer's framework as the basis of this, like the set of rules that they have established, the set of relationships between the variables in the game that they have established as a baseline, as a standard, to determine if a card is powerful, weak, overpowered, underpowered, those type of things. And if you look at the game, like the set of variables is not terribly complex. We actually just have like the magic cost, we have the health of the units, and we have the attack power. There's two types of attack power, but those are the three main variables. And then we have a fourth one, which is the abilities. And that's the one that has a lot of design room for like the creativity of the designers. because that can vary a lot, right? It's harder to measure that. It's not just numbers like the other ones, but we can just like summarize them as positive abilities, negative abilities, or conditional abilities, in which they are gonna be uh, requiring a cost and then giving you something, right? So those are the three type of abilities. And then we have the events in which we have the equivalency of one card. Like you could potentially always just pitch one of the cards for magic. So that's the equivalency for an effect, right? So instead of pitching that card for magic, you're going to be using the event and then expecting an effect. So what we are looking at there is, are you getting one magic worth of, or like one card worth of effect on the board? Like what you're doing on the board at any given time, is it being worth that magic or not? So that's how we are going to be analyzing that, like based on what has been established as the standard. So one example of this, what do I mean with this? So when the game started, it was defined that for one card you can deal 2 damage, right? Like that's the burn event from the Phoenix Elves.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, when they created that card, they are establishing a baseline for a type of event card that deals direct damage. So if then one of the new decks suddenly has an event that can deal 4 damage, like I would make the argument that that is like a bad card. It's a bad design decision because you're making the previous card obsolete. Like, why would anyone want to play the old card if now you have a card that on the same phase can just deal 4 damage?
Yeah.
Right? It's not a balanced decision. It's not a balanced game, and a game that is not balanced is not a fun game to play. But what if the designer instead says, like, you know what? Okay, so we had set the baseline for a move phase 2 damage for one card. Then if they make a card that deals 3 damage, but in the summon phase, then that would make sense, right? That would be balanced because you're removing something from the card, like the reach, the additional reach that you have for the effect when you move, for the extra damage. So you're getting something extra, you're giving something away. So that's like this common set of the design aspects that you see in most of the games. You can certainly see that in games like Magic the Gathering, right? In which it's been running for so long that you have the same effect that they have redone like 20 times. And they always try to like adjust like some minor twitch to try to make it feel different or be different. So that's the way we're going to be doing this, right? And there's many other baselines or standards that the designers have set with just the units. It's really easy to see, like for all everyone that has been playing for a while, everyone knows that for 2 magic, it's expected to be getting like a 2 power, 2 melee, 5 health unit. Like that's pretty common. For 1 magic, it's common to be getting like a 2 health, 3 ranged attack with some ability, most of the time like a positive ability at that cost. If you're getting more health, then you probably have a negative ability on that type of attack and health value, or you have a conditional effect, and so on, right? There's many of those. We all know that for 0 magic and like 1 unit, like the card, you can get a 2 melee, 2 health unit, and with an ability, right? With let's say moderately positive ability. So there's all those baselines already established in the game. So we can really just use that to determine if a card is has the correct stats, the correct power level, if it makes sense just with that baseline that the game has established. And it's not just based on, oh, well, I feel that this could be, it's really based on the own decisions that the game designers have built. If it's, there's some coherency with what we're getting now. And most games really end up getting, like, the tough thing with Summoner Wars is that it's easy to fall into power creep in games, right? Because you keep needing to think of like newer things, cool things that are going to get people excited. So you can just be doing the same effect as before. So you have to be just making things like do more, right? And the thing with other games is that after like a few months, years, like Magic as an example, which we were mentioning, is that the the standards, like the cycles actually that people play on the formats, they keep moving, right? So every new set, it kicks off one of the older sets out. So then whatever the sign conflicts you could have, like you don't have to worry about them after they keep cycling each other out. But with the Summoner Wars, that's not the case. Like all the factions are forever. They are meant to be coexisting in the same space. So that's why it's becomes a little bit harder from that perspective. But anyway, so what do you think of that way of analyzing the cards and measuring like how powerful or not they are?
Yeah, and then the only question is how do we extrapolate from that to a faction power level? Because that's that's not always as easy as it seems. Because like a deck itself can have cards in it that maybe themselves are like B tier, and then another card that's S tier. It's like, well, how do we then measure all of that? And a lot of times, like yeah, it's difficult to look at all the parts. Just a deck is just a set of parts. Like you have to like also think about synergies. For instance, like a wind archer like really doesn't seem that good on its own because it dies so easily. But in a deck that has wind mages, it's suddenly very strong. And so
Mhm.
yeah, what how we then think about like synergy to
Yeah.
like ultimately come to a faction ranking.
Exactly. So you just mentioned one of the like primary ones that we're going to be looking for that, right? Like we were saying with Shadow Elves that all the cards are just, I mean, solid by themselves, but they really shine and become super powerful once you see the interactions between them. So that's what we're going to be doing, and that's where we bring, I guess, also a bit of the value with the experience that we have in the game and the knowledge we have of it, in which we understand like which effects are more powerful or less powerful. Like I had said in the past, like one of the most powerful effects in the game is being able to attack and then hide, or attack and then gain a blocker for the summoner. Like a way of protecting the summoner after attacking is something that is extremely powerful, right? It's more powerful than getting a +1 strength. I think most people would agree that there are some effects that you can objectively say, like, yeah, I mean, this effect is more powerful than this other effect. So I think in those two ways, we'll be able to make the argument on why some of them might be more or less powerful based on the type of things that the game rewards you for doing or having. And that was the reason why Shadow Elves ended up so high on the scale, right? Because the thing that they're good at is assassinating the summoner, and that's kind of really what gives you the game. A deck that is not that good at hitting the summoner but at destroying commons maybe wouldn't have the same impact, because there are greater rewards in this game for being good at protecting the summoner or attacking the summoner. So that part is going to be a bit more of like we'll have to make the argument for it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, when we'll see how we can get there. And also just like see how that can factor into each. Well, it's up to you. I would do it as in also when we go card by card. Also mentioning it's like, well, this has such a powerful place in the deck that this is a very valuable card. But
Mhm.
it's it's tough. There's a lot to think about with these discussions, and we're not even really getting into the meta side of things.
Yeah, exactly. But let's give it a try. So let's start going through them and see where we're at, right? Like, so we start with the breakers. Like, what we see, the summoner, like it has an above average amount of health, right? This is a summoner that it's you don't rely on the summoner being all the time in the middle of the combat, but it has a very useful ability that allows you to go into like a long game and still get resources just from stealing cards. Then we can see the epic event. This is a very powerful trick for assassination. Like it's one of those in which sometimes, like if you just start rushing at them, even if they try to protect themselves, you can just close the game with this one. Or if they're actually just rushing at you and the summoner is part of that, so it allows the matchups like to not just for them to not just be able to completely overwhelm you and have the summoner be a part of that without any risk. So I would say that's definitely solid. It's a good event. I think let's do first events, common units, and then we'll do the champions.
Yeah.
So the theme of this, guys, is a range game. I think the main issue that they have for competitive play, which we've mentioned, for competitive play, it's important to have consistency, right? Because you know you're going to have to be playing many matches, and you have to win all of them in this current format that we have. You have a very low amount of matches you can lose before you're out of the competition, and the higher you go, the less matches you can even lose. So that's one of the things that hurts the breakers the most, is that you're going to have some very inconsistent games. Like all the attacks are ranged on the common units. So sometimes you'll just get some massive whiffs that are just going to completely destroy your hopes. The other one is that, well, they have low health, and their game is to keep the things, like pretty far away. But when the opponent starts, and it's one of those factions that start on the third row, you're already like that plan A. Sometimes it's already out of reach, so it's hard to survive in those. So that's another thing that is really one of those luck-based things, in which it's the coin toss, whoever starts, and that makes a huge difference for the breakers. And that's, I think, why the breakers, it's hard for them to be a consistent faction that is able to compete at the highest levels. We've seen some of the senior players, like some of the top players, can use these guys in an amazing way. They have some awesome tricks with the Wind Mage and the Deceiver. And the Mind Witch, it's one of those kind of like wild card abilities that sometimes it doesn't do anything, and you just have like a 2-3, like 2 health. I'll do the life first and then the attack whenever I talk about them, to not have to be specifying. So you have a 2-3, and that we've said like that's the baseline for a unit, a ranged unit, right? But usually you have a positive effect. In this case, like the positive effect could be like devastating for the opponent, or can do absolutely nothing, right? So against the Grogs, for example, this card doesn't do anything outside of the attack. But against something like the Shadow Elves, it's just amazing, because the Seekers become a liability for them. Like this guy is attacking for this gal is attacking for 5, and that's just huge. Like pretty much you cannot leave Seekers around, or you're going to pay a price. Same thing against, for example, the Savannah Elves. Like being able to copy their archers, like man, there's like attacking for 6 is just massive. So I mean, at worst, this is just the baseline of a ranged unit. At best, you're going to be at least copying your Wind Mages, and then be able to have 8 units, 9 units with the starting one that give you the push ability. So that one is a great unit. Wind Mage is a great unit. It's great that it has 3 health. So we've also seen that the baseline for units, when you have 3 health for 1 magic, it's rare that you're going to be getting 3 attack, right? Like it will be above the baseline. So the baseline there is that you're going to have only 2 attack to get the extra health. But this deck really needs the health. So it makes a big difference, because between 2 and 3 is the difference between surviving 1 attack or not surviving even like a single attack, getting killed. The Deceiver is all about this combos with the Mind Witch and the Wind Mage. So those guys, you're going to be sending them forward, and then just trying to clog gates, clog like their big units, etc. So we can see here that for 1 magic, there's also another baseline for 1 attack, in which it's either a conditional 1 attack that you can increase if you have some effects, like with the Polar Dwarves Frost Mage, or Frost Archer, or that one, or you have a positive ability, right? In this case, you have Engage and Stupefy. So that makes up for the lack of attack, because you want it for the ability. So we can see this one is also just on the baseline, has a good ability that has a lot of synergy with the rest of the deck. And finally, the 2 magic unit. So that one we've seen for range units. The baseline is usually around, I believe, for 2, it's like 3 health and 4 attack, right? If I remember correctly from most of the units that have this cost. So this one is slightly below that, but we could have to look at the ability, right? It's probably because it has a very good ability that has to make up for that extra life. And we can see that indeed it has Far Shot, which is, I think, the only common unit that has this type of ability, which can be really strong in this game. Especially against like melee units, you'll be able to attack them and they wouldn't be able to attack you back until like multiple moves, unless they are already on your side of the field. So it can be really good when things are going your way on the space, but also Swift, which opens a lot of doors for assassination to allow you to cover the flank of the summoner or many things like that. So we can see that losing that one health is just the result of having some very solid abilities. So I would say the Wind Archer is also costed properly. It plays well with what
Yeah.
the deck is trying to do. Then the other events, so Perplexing Tempest is one of those which is situational, which I would say that's the normal place that you want events to be at. Like it's as you have said before, I also don't think that events have to be like so strong that you have to play it every single time with no decision, no conditions, nothing at all. So this is one of those type of events, like when things are going your way that you are able to keep a distance or you don't want them to escape. There are many situations in which this event is good, and it's a very unique event. Like I think there's no other event almost that have something like that.
Yeah.
Hypnotic Call is, it's not super powerful like what you get if you look at it, it's just 1+1 strength. But the fact that you're able to force a unit, it's what I believe makes it be a meaningful event. It's the power level, it's good because it allows you to do some massive plays. Like when the opponent thinks that they're safe now because they just put their summoner in a very specific position. This allows you to just completely change that and make some combos between this and mind capture or control or things like that. So
Yeah.
it plays really well with the rest of the deck. And finally, Blast. This is the one that we've analyzed before, and this is something that the power level of the events has changed from the first 6 or 8 factions to what we have today. And this is the one that I think it's overcosted. We've seen that there are very few one magic events, and the ones that are one magic is because they're extremely powerful. And this is not the case, right? Like this really just gives you on average 2 to 4 damage that you're going to be getting on their units. At least you usually get 2 because the unit you target, another unit that you push it through, and then when you manage to put some deceiver around there, then you get like another damage, maximum 2 most of the times. So for 2 to 4 damage, getting like to pay this, I think it's too much. Sometimes you can also use this on your own units for like the final damage of an assassination type of thing, but it's a situational event. Like even if you have it at 0 magic, if their units are not lined up, like you don't play it, right? It's like you wouldn't play this for 1 damage, right? Like maybe you play it if you're removing a blocker or something, but most of the time at 0, if there's not a good situation, you might just discard it. You're not gonna hold it for a lot of turns, but if you're getting like 2, 3 damage, which I believe it's a reasonable amount for an event, it's something that you would play. So I think this is one that is underpowered based on the amount of damage that you expect or value you expect to get nowadays from an event. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll chime in for a second. I think part of the power of level of blast can also come from repositioning. There's the obvious like push an enemy unit into an area that you're more easily able to attack it. Um, though and I also think there's plays where just pushing a very important enemy unit 3 spaces back can be very powerful, and I wonder if that if that's part of the reason that it ended up at 1 cost. Like I think blast in I don't know, in my personal opinion, blast at 0 cost is slightly too good. Like if we could do like like 0.3 costs or something like that, that would be more accurate. But obviously there's just the struggle of like when you add 1 cost to an event, you're effectively doubling its cost if you consider like playing a card being equivalent to paying 1 magic. but yeah, the positional aspect of blast as well, like obviously like against like an important enemy champion, like if you just like blast Dragos back 3 spaces, or the Eater, but no one's playing the Eater against Takulu, that can play into their chief advantage of just like, if I can keep the enemy at a range, I can win. So yeah, I think it's more than necessarily just the damage, though. I'm also with you. Also on just a, a qualitative basis of I never play this card, so clearly
Yeah.
instinctually I've developed, yeah.
And the thing is, yeah, it's true with the position, but you have to think there's also a cost on for you with the position. It means that you need to have the summoner in a certain spot that has that connection with whatever you're going to target. And that means that many times you have to bring it forward or expose it or leave it exposed. So there's a cost from that perspective too. It's not like if you
Mm-hmm.
were able to just pick any unit on the field without needing to like Takulu to be within that range. Like, yeah, it would be too powerful. But the thing is, you'd need to make that happen with Takulu too. And then she's going to be exposed because you need to have clear spaces most of the time for that. So there's those considerations that even at zero, I would still say that it's like a situational event that sometimes you're just going to discard. But whenever you do that push, like what you're getting for that event, I would think it makes sense, especially with the new baseline. Like with just the first state decks, maybe at zero it would be too powerful. But if you look at the events that we have nowadays, I would say that what you get for zero, it would just be an event that you play most of the time instead of discard most of the time. But still not
Yeah.
an event that you're like must play, that I must keep it. Like sometimes the situation would just not be there. Tukulu is on low life, or the enemy you want to blast is not close to Tukulu, or you don't have enough moves, and then you just discard it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
So far, as you can see, like they're all really like cards that have a lot of synergy. They're decent. The main weakness really is just that if they already start close to you, all of your range plan is just harder to take advantage of the benefits of the range units. And then the champions, right? Like the champions we can see are pretty highly costed, which is the same pattern we'll see in all of the older decks. Like right now, I think that's also something that has shifted in the design space of the champions. They probably discovered that the champions at this cost were really, let's just say, not cost efficient. Like what you were getting was not worth the on the field was not worth the amount of magic that you were putting on. And most of the times, like when you're playing with these factions, if you make like a cost benefit analysis, you realize like, yeah, this is not worth. It's not worth playing this champions. So you just discard them, and that's not where you want the game to be. You want the champion to be like a viable option. So they're probably most of them are at least Wallark. It's nearly overcosted. I think probably as at 5 it would be all right, I guess, because we've seen that for 5 magic the baseline I believe today is 3 melee, 7 health, somewhere around there. So this guy, okay, if he doesn't have melee, it makes sense for him to have 1 more health. And then you have like a positive ability that doesn't give you resource advantage, because for 7/3 or 5, usually you get some from their ability, you get some resource advantage. Whether it be like another card from the graveyard, from the discard pile, or something that gives you that you can make the equivalency with 1 magic. This guy doesn't give you anything like that, but it gives you some reach, extra reach. So I would say that it would probably fall within the for 5 magic, like a 3 range at 8 health, with flight and levitate would probably be a fairly costed one that would see much more play. Still would be kind of situational, but it would be easier to play him. If anyone says that the 8 life would be too much and send it to 7, like I would also like that would probably still be okay if it's too strong. But yeah, that guy is probably the worst one. Then Gul'dun, this one we can see, well, 6, it's a lot like 6 magic, right? But instead of getting the 3 melee that you get for 5, I guess it makes sense to get 4 melee. We've seen that when you go over 5 magic, you start getting that extra attack power. It has low health, but I guess it balances it out because it's giving you an extra attack. So it would be too powerful, probably, if it had more health. Like it's 4 melee plus whatever extra attack you're going to be getting. So
Yeah.
This guy, I mean, might be all right. It's the one that you play the most, really, because of how strong it is to get the extra attack. So it might make sense to have this guy at 6. And Kalal at 7. I don't know, like today at 7, um, there aren't that many. Like we see less and less champions that are costed this way. She's still good. Sometimes you just have to heavily discard to be able to get her. Like focus your plan a lot with her, but she has such a strong ability that it's really hard to tell if it would be too broken if she costed less. Like I wouldn't make an argument unless someone tested it with different metrics to see if it's too broken or not. I think she's still playable like this. You still see her every now and then because she's just good. The thing is, like the card is good. The thing is, she's a bit expensive. So that's the only thing with this one. But overall, as you can see, the deck is solid. But the main things that would keep them, I would say, from being that A tier, at least A tier for competitive, would be the high variance with range units, and the fact that their plan relies on creating distance with the opponent, and you won't be able to do that all the time, especially when they already start in your face, right? Example like fungal dwarves. Like they're already almost getting into your side of the field just with their starting setup. And if they start, they're already going to be in your face. So it's very hard to deal with those matchups. They also have a hard time dealing with factions with high health because of the same attack variance. Like matchups like the Savannah Elves are really hard because for these guys to deal like 6 damage, like it can take you your 3 attacks, and sometimes like you're just gonna whiff and not even get a kill with your 3 attacks. So that happens often, especially in the games, which this type of games many times they won't end fast. Like you'll be able to survive for a bit. You'll be rolling a lot. So just because of the nature of the deck related to that, I think I wouldn't put them on an A tier, at least for competitive. For sure, for competitive. On the overall power level, I would say if you corrected Blast and you corrected at least one of the champs, like the one that is, I believe, obvious for everyone, like Waller, that he's useless 98%, 99% of the times. Like if that guy was decent and playable every now and then, I think this deck would be A tier on the power scale. Not on competitive because of the variance, but yes on the power scale if Blast and Wallard was fixed. Without that fix, I would say they fall under the B tier, which B tier we're going to be calling it as underpowered. So S tier we're going to say it's above the average of like the standard, like at A tier we're say it's like the baseline or on where a deck would be if all their cards were useful and they had synergy and it was like a deck in that way, like that would be A, and B would be below that. Like it's it's underpowered. C
Yeah.
would be highly underpowered or something like that.
Yeah,
What do
exactly. Yeah, and so this is where it gets interesting, especially when we look at a deck and we're like, yeah, for the most part, like every card is good and there's lots of synergy, but then like, but then how would we assess like what overarching dynamics would put it somewhere else? So yeah, the two things being that some factions can just rush you really well, which makes just the keep them at a ranged approach kind of difficult, and also the variance to with range dice just intrinsic with the deck. I think it's interesting, like from a design standpoint, like what sort of decks are viable to make at totally ranged decks. Like we haven't gotten another totally ranged deck since breakers, and there's probably a reason for that. It's probably
it's
pretty difficult to balance, but there's an interesting like what sort of upsides do you need to give a deck for that to be viable? And I think a lot of Takulu's power can come from her control. It's like if you miss all your dice, but you're well positioned so that none of your low health units can be killed, and you have deceivers against enemy units. Well, the enemy's turn like is still under control. It's not going to be devastating, and she has the control, the resolve tools to do that, as well as the tools to keep the enemy at a range, to keep that ranged advantage. So that like there's the give and the take in terms of power level. Okay, how do we offset the range dice? So like just from a design perspective. So yeah, I'd probably be with you that power level wise, A tier. I'd probably say A minus tier. But I'm willing to go B, like just for raw power, and then that they'd be up to A if we buff the cards. But and I think I'm also willing to concede that in a competitive setting. They're less than that. I'm not sure how much of it is the range dice versus the matchups as well. Like I could say, I've been struggling with breakers recently, and I can't exactly say why. I feel like they used to be consistent, and all of a sudden I'm losing all the time. So
Yeah,
that's not objective at all, but that's how I'm feeling.
yeah, and one thing that what you were saying was that, for example, the deceivers, they rely a lot on the deceiver interactions. And this is something we'll see with all the factions that rely on specials for some of their value. The fact that sometimes the deceiver is just completely like overwhelms the opponents, in which they try to attack them and they just keep getting specials, and
Yeah.
sometimes the whole turn gets ruined for the opponent because of the deceivers. I said, but sometimes like they just don't get any special and they just kill them fast. So it's one of these decks that has that kind of like luck factor, I would say, that high variance factor that gets added into the range dice, and that's why you get so inconsistent results with them.
Yeah.
Hey, let's go to the
I think
next one.
I'm set to move on. And
Yeah,
maybe it's all right if we also don't end up finishing day today, but maybe for the interest of time, I'll let you go through the cards on your own first, and then maybe at the end of that I'll chime in if I have any if any disagreements or other points to make, and then after that we can talk about the power level as a whole. But I'll just let you have the floor
yeah,
for the first bit.
exactly. And actually, I won't go that in depth into the cards because we have a lot of them to go through. So let's just
We do.
go with the Cave Goblins,
Yeah.
and then let's just say if they're underpowered or overpowered and everything, right? So, okay, so we have Sneaks, right? He has a great ability that allows him to just get out of the way completely. So that's pretty solid. He has the average type of health around 11. So it's good for this type of deck. Enrage, the epic event. So this is a one magic like event, but this really has to be like what you get for one magic, because most of the time you're going to be getting on average, I would say 3 extra attacks, right? So getting 3 attacks, that's like 4, 5, 6 at least, 5 to 6 dice on one. Like this is what I would expect for a one magic event, right? Like getting that type of damage. Sometimes you even get more. So this can be game ending. Then you have Unrelenting, which allows you to just like denies the opponent the magic, just gives you all the units back. So one magic, and also the type of events that I would expect for one magic. Pylon is a great event on this deck because most of the attackers, all of the attackers, like they have a low attack, right? Like except for the Beast Rider, but everything else doesn't hit that hard. So this event allows you to just add a ton of damage to whatever you're overwhelming. So it's just a perfectly example of something that is a synergy with everything else. Like by itself, it's not amazing sometimes, but on the scenarios that you're going to be building with the goblins, it's amazing. And Sneak, it's also amazing because this deck, the main restriction that it has is the 3 movements. So this thing allows you to just completely reshuffle the board in ways that it's super hard to predict and play around for the opponent. So it's a very valuable one. The units we have for the classic 2-2-4-0 but with well, I guess advantage and disadvantage. It just meant to be so that you can interact with the other ones. It cannot move by itself, but then it can just uh, like grab ons to something else. So it bypasses the 3 move limitation. So you'll be able to move 2 with this one. So it's a pretty cool card from that perspective. The Beast Rider, we can see there's another baseline. For 2 magic, you get a 3 life, 3 attack unit, 3 melee, and the positive effect. Right, that's another baseline that was established on the first set of cards. This one has the extra move. It can get the extra power. Most of the times we'll see that the the two magic 3/3s have a way of dealing a fourth damage with a condition. So this one is just like that extra move. So it's a solid card. This Linger. It's one of those that there aren't that many, but I guess this guy was the one that established the baseline for like a 0 cost range unit, which tends to, well, especially tends to be like two health, two range. This guy is only 1 life, so you're getting something for that life, which is being able to attack like as an extra attack, which is amazing in this deck. Finally, the Climber, extra range. So you're getting, instead of the extra attack, you're getting 1 more life for the 0 cost. And you have like a slightly positive ability that it's not too strong, but it just gives you the extra range and getting through gates, which is amazing for this deck because this deck just wants to overwhelm the opponent. Just has to get as many units on the board and then just go forward and surround the opponent. So the main issues with this deck is that all the units are pretty like weak, easy to kill. You need to put a lot of units on the board. So that means that you need to have multiple gates. If you don't have enough gates, you're not going to be able to hit that critical mass, and they'll be able to just keep killing the 2-3 units you have around with like easily. So this deck really needs to get those gates to be able to take off and really start doing things. Also, it has a high dependency on the order of the events or having the right event at the right time to do like those big plays. So it can do some plays that can defeat any deck. Like you can just overwhelm them, and suddenly, like if you surround someone and do pile on, you can be throwing like killing a summoner that had full life. But like that means that you have a single turn to be able to that window of opportunity. And if you don't have the pylon at that time, like forget about it, right? It's not something that you can build on for like a plan for it 3-4 turns. Like you can't be holding events for so long, especially those like sometimes you hold a rage or unrelenting. But even that hurts this deck because it really needs to be emptying its hand almost every single turn to just fill the board with goblins to then be able to do the big plays. So that is why this deck struggles in competitive. Like you're not gonna get that every time. Like you're gonna be getting that like every 1 or 2 games or something like that. And the champs, I think they're well. All of these cards we've seen, they're solid. Like they're by themselves, they just play well with each other and they're costed properly. The champions, Blarf, just the type of champ that is just overstated for that. Like you don't pay anything for him, but you have to pay it with like extra magic every turn, unless you get the negative effect. So I think that champ is pretty cool. It plays well with the theme of the deck, with the fact that you don't have many things that cost magic. Smeg is similar thing. Like you have extra stats for not paying anything for it, but the cost comes with time that you have to be paying an upkeep for it. And finally, the Eater. I think that's the only card that, with time, has become like underpowered, like underbalanced. Let's say it's not that it's weak; it's just almost useless most of the time because this is a very significant negative effect. Like investing 6 magic on something that could just not do anything at all. It's something big. Like most of the time, you won't want to take the risk. So this means that you can only play it in matchups in which they cannot escape. Like they cannot really have enough moves to just get all the units out of the way, or it becomes a massive burden trying to keep your units there. So I think this is the only one that time hasn't been good on him. Like today, I think it used some boost to just make it at least playable in some situations. And but other than that, all the deck is pretty well built. It has a very thematic theme, like well, a very thematic strategy, a strategy of just overwhelming the opponent with all those small goblins. So it's pretty cool from that perspective, but it's not consistent, right? And in a game in which you're measuring like, well, good decks are the ones that are able to win consistently, this deck is not going to be that. So yeah, I would say that's why for competitive, I would put them at C, right? Because it's not only The like if you don't get gates, you're just gonna lose if you don't get them fast. And even if you get them, if you don't get the right order of things, then it's not going to work out. Or there are many matchups in which they have ways of dealing damage other than the three attacks that they have on that turn. And on those matchups, like you just don't stand. Like it's very hard to win those. I mean, you always have a chance because you can always just overwhelm them with one big play. But things like going against the Phoenix Elves, in which we have a ton of ways of dealing damage, and then also
This is
attacking
not
or
real at
things like
this
that. It's
point.
really hard to win. So it's a very fun deck. I really enjoy playing it, but it's not strong and competitive. And even in just the power level, if we just say the power level, maybe I would make the case for B because of what they're able to do. Even on that power level, they're a little bit inconsistent. But I think if the Eater was a playable champion, that would give you a tool against many of the matchups that are really hard because they have many ways of dealing, like wiping out like small units. So I think if they fix the Eater to either have some type of ability like Segment, the new champion that is similar, but if he doesn't kill something, like you deal 2 damage to it at the end of turn, something like that, or any other, like there's probably many ways of fixing it. Probably if you fix the Eater, I would say like, yeah, they're definitely on B because that would be your tool that you use against those bad matchups, right? Something like when you go against Fungal Dwarves, like if the Eater was a solid card, like that would be a thing that you would be playing all the time to try to help you get out of those situations. But what like that not being the case, I would probably think that they are C because of the horrible matchups that they have, in which they have no tools, almost no tools at all. Like Fungal Dwarfs is one example. I recently played that in one of the Tortugatron events, and man, what a pain it is to play that matchup. It's it's one of the most frustrating matchups you can face.
Yeah.
There's probably some others that are similar. Yeah.
Yes, like Grimstead Order. Chat is very upset to go against the age-old dogma of CG top tier. But I'm with you. Like there's no other faction where it feels like the draws matter so much. Where if you just like get too many events early and all your gates are in the bottom half, like uh, you just feel like you suffer more than any other deck. You don't have any other possible game plan. There's just there's no wait and then go. Like you really just have to go right away. So yeah, I think
Yeah,
I'm with
that's
you.
another reason. They have a single game plan. Like most of the decks, you can play either offensively or defensively. That's not the case for the Goblin. They only have one mode, and that's just like the crazy overrun the opponent type of thing. So that's another reason why, yeah, definitely like I would say C because um, probably from all of the factions we're seeing there, they are the ones that are the most, as you said, like draw dependent. Like the order of the draws is the most significant in this faction than any other.
Yeah. And so I think power level wise, I would personally put them in B. Just because of how how strong how strong their plays can be, or at least like I really think a buffed eater would swing some of the bad matchup like against fungal dwarves. If like you had an eater to just like stand up to those fungal beasts, that would really help. So I honestly think that if that card was buffed, that could negate some of the bad matchup. But I hear you, and I'm willing to leave them in C just for the reliance on dice and the bad matchups. But I also don't want anyone to think that like you don't have a chance if you're playing cave goblins. Like you absolutely do. You can destroy games. And any ranking in Summoner Wars, even I don't know, when we put a faction at C, that probably means because like I don't know, like maybe like on average that they'd instead of having a 50% chance to win, there'd be a 40% if you like analyze all the matchups. I don't even think it would be that bad for cave goblins. So in Summoner Wars is a very tightly balanced game where you always have a chance any given time. Okay, like there's a few matchups these days. There's a couple matchups where you kind of like almost don't, but pretty much always you have a chance, no matter the faction, no matter the matchup. And player skill is a much higher determining factor than faction balance. But that's a whole other discussion. But yeah, just
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
And I agree. Like if the ether was adjusted, I could probably see them being B. And not sure exactly like what you would need to do to adjust that guy. Like maybe at least change the so that the ability is not that drastic. But at 6 magic, not sure if it would make sense nowadays to just have them at 6 melee or something like that, as the new cards are just able to hit for so much melee that for 6 magic you would expect something that more. Because I'm not sure if you would like adjust the health or the attack on these guys.
yeah. And so just briefly, so point of order. So we'll be. Do you want to keep the tier list for power level? And so we'll keep mentioning what like how competitive play changes it. But I'll keep the display for power level, or how do you want to do it?
Yeah, let's keep the display just for the general power level,
Yeah.
because I mean we saw some of the in some of the times like the goblins, it's related with the competitive too, right? Like that's the same reason that keeps it so
Yeah.
low. So yeah, it's kind of a bit of both. I guess there might just be a few factions in which there's a conflict between the just general power level and the competitive specifics. But this guy, we know that both in like the general sense and in competitive, that's where I would put it without having answers to a lot of the decks and having like all the luck of the draw factors like heavily affected by that. So yeah, we can just keep it for
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds good.
power
And
levels, not competitive, and we'll see if we come up with some conflicts with some of the factions.
yeah.
So it would be different depending on which perspective you take.
Yeah, and I'll just define that difference there. And in the other video we did where we just went through things very quickly, we also went over like what exactly we mean by competitive play. But I think the yeah, correct me with what you think. But when I think competitive play, I think we're talking specifically about plaid hat tournaments or any other tournament where so in a plaid hat tournament you need to win 3 rounds of 8 games each, I believe. So a faction. So when you're taking a given faction, you need to get through about like 24 games to, or well, okay, wait, no, but that's not necessarily okay. That faction itself needs to win 6, but you get because if you're whatever. Because you'd be taking 4 factions, whatever. There's a lot of games you need to win. So, and
That's right.
there's a lot of other players that are very good. So, it's not just a single game by game uh, determinations, but over overall the more games you play, even if you have like a faction that is just slightly below the power level, like losing that extra game can be the difference between making it to the next round or not. And so consistency is key for competitive play. You need to you need to bring a faction that's not going to be reliant on luck, and you need to bring a faction that's not going to be losing to the top dogs, the S tier factions, that doesn't have any terrible matchups. So there's a lot of determining factors for this like specific set of you need consistency for competitive play, which is that's generally what I mean when I talk about the difference between like power level and competitive play. I don't know how would you put it exactly?
No, that's right. Like that's just in those tournaments, it's 24 games, 6 with each faction, and that's just before the finals. Like the finals, that will be 3 more games.
Yeah.
So imagine like needing the cave goblins to give you like those amazing, powerful draws and hands like 6 times in a row. Like it's not gonna happen, right? Like it will eventually be like giving you some matchups in which you just lose straight up because you didn't have the elements that you needed. So it's hard to really make it that way. Like you cannot rely on factions with such a high degree of variability if you're going into those competitive environments like hoping to have a good chance of winning them.
Yeah, sounds good. But so what we'll have on play though will be more just like the general power level. So if a faction has like higher variance, and whatnot, that's and if a faction's like particularly weak against the S tier factions, that's not something that we will keep factor into what we have on display right now. And
Yeah.
that is what we factored into in the previous video, so you can go watch that if you're interested. But shall we move on? Anything else to mention here?
Yeah, well, let's go to the next one. So
Fallen Kingdom.
Fallen Kingdom. So this one, it's hard to analyze this one because,
Yes.
I mean, let's see. So we have Red Talus, right? This one is a very special summoner. Like his amount of life is really just means how many units you can bring back. This guy is not supposed to be anywhere near danger. You're gonna try to just use him as to produce the units, and then all the events are played pretty well. I would say this is the closest thing to that this game has to a combo deck that you're really trying to make those like absurd like one turn things that suddenly just win the game automatically. So we have Sacrificial Pyre, which costs one. This is the type of event that it makes sense to have a cost, the extra cost, because traditionally it's going to be giving you around 6 life. So that translates to 3 extra units that you're going to be able to revive, right? So that's some really good value there. Even if you just get around 4 life, that's a non-successful Sacrificial Pyre. That's still 2 units for 1 magic, 1 event. Then the other events are allow you to do those pretty cool combos. Like Blood Summons is one of those events that it's I guess a little bit busted. Like it has that weird interaction that weird thing in which you can just be doing damage to the units even if you're not summoning anything. So that allows you to just kill everything that you don't need in that turn to get your warriors to the maximum attack value, or do like things like that, right? And it also gives you the unexpected summon in which suddenly you're surrounding them when you were pretty far, like not even close to the range, but then you just got 4 units out of it. So this is the key card for the whole deck, like the combo type of turns when you just go for the kill that way. Then we have Hellforge Weapon, which is just a average event, like pretty solid for what you're trying to do. You get 2 extra strength, and then there's the downside. But the cool thing of the downside of having damage being dealt to your units is that sometimes you can use it in your advantage with some combination with the archers, where you want the archer to die so that then another archer takes the position and you get the extra attack. So it has a lot of synergy there with the deck. And finally, Purge, solid event for 0 cost. You sacrifice your units to deal direct damage to the opponent. So that combos really well with the Cultist, combos really well with the Pyre. Really good interactions there. Then you get the units, they're all on the baseline, like for 0 cost. You get a 2/2 range with the Cultist, which has a positive ability that interacts really well with Blood Summons, with Hellforged Weapons, with Purge. So a really good team player. The archers are an interesting one because they are overcosted. Like usually this type of effect would be costing you like 1 magic. But I guess because Soul Shift is it's really powerful, and it's probably just because like Soul Shift can allow you to do some really busted things that they decided to send this to 2. So this is just the fact that the ability is so good that they had to just increase the cost. And the fact that, well, Red Talus is able to revive units, so it kind of balances that out. Like, okay, well, it's pretty expensive, but because this guy can just keep bringing units for free. If I have to pay for the units, they are not supposed to be too cheap, right? So it balances that out. And then you have the average value for a 1 magic melee unit is that it's gonna have 3 health and 2 attack, right? So you get that with a carrier. And this guy is really strong because it gives the deck like a alternative win condition of just overwhelming the opponent with zombies, with the infect, which is one of the strongest abilities in the deck. Especially bringing back something with 3 health that they won't be able to many times just kill with a single attack. And if they don't finish it off, then they can just keep eating each other, which is always feels weird from the theme perspective. Then they just keep coming back and back and back. And that you have a slight downside because you have such a strong ability that they don't give you magic, right? Because they're already giving you the unit.
Yeah.
So it has that, and then the warrior. This is an interesting unit because it has 4 health and 2 melee for 2 magic, right? So it's slightly below the baseline of 2/5, but that's because it has imbued strength. With overcomes, like it's not really 2 melee most of the time, right? At least you're going to be getting 3 melee, 4 melee out of it under the normal turn. And when you do the full combos, this guy can get busted all the way to 6/7 attack, right? So this guy is one of the like the base cards of the deck, like the strongest cards on the deck that you're going to try to abuse as much as possible. So as you see, like all of these cards are really strong. Like there's really nothing to complain on all this stuff.
Yeah.
Then the champions. I guess this is where, as usual with the original decks, where we see some things that don't really line up that well with what you're paying. So with the current baseline of 5 magic, like getting something like 7/3, and for 6 magic being able to get the extra melee damage, Dragos is I think it's on a good baseline. Like it makes sense because it even has a positive ability, right? So at 6 you get the extra health and you get the extra melee, and sometimes for 6 you can get up to 9 or 10 health, but you don't have like such a strong ability. I would say that the ability in Dragos plays well with the rest of the deck because many times you want to sacrifice those cultists. You can sacrifice those extra carriers which are damaged. You want to sacrifice something for the pyre. So Dragos, I don't think it's under costed or overcosted. Like it's pretty good for what you're paying for. But the other two are questionable. Like Gul'das, like for 6 getting like that those stats, it's awful, right? So the concept of this guy is that he's going to get hit and then he's going to hit really hard, but at 8 health, like most of the times, like you can barely get one hit with more than 2 melee and then he dies. So at that point you always feel like you end up getting the like uh, losing value out of him. Sometimes, like the idea is that you're able to summon him and do a blood summons off him and immediately attack for 5 or 6. But at that point, this guy has like 4 life or something like that, so they can easily kill him. Well, not easily, but consistently kill him in a single turn. So I would say he's slightly overcosted for what you get. Maybe the fix is something as easy as making him like 10 life, something like that, and maybe have a limit on how much damage he can deal or something like that. But I think most people would agree that this guy is not good value for what you're getting and could definitely be adjusted to the current standards of champions. I guess Salute Bell is a little bit harder to measure. Like you're getting 6 melee is something that is uncommon, right? It's supposed to be like a super strong attack unit. I think there are very few units that are that just like their attack until like the Deepwood Groves came and suddenly like 6 is something that a common can just consistently do 4 times in a game. Right? Like that kind of like broke the measurement of 6 melee was supposed to be like crazy strong. So what this is what this guy was supposed to be, and the big effect was that he was able to suddenly pop up out of like unexpected places. I guess the amount of health they have in him is just for probably for a theme, the 666 theme, but I'm not sure like if I would say definitively that he's overcosted because the whole point of him is to be able to suddenly pop up out of the front lines and just kill the summoner or just do something very big. So I don't mind him having low health, and many times, like at least he's able to survive one turn with 6 health. So I'm not sure if I would say that this guy needs to be adjusted. He's just a situational champ. That he's gonna come for those assassinations in front, like in the advanced field positions. So I mean, I could hear arguments for adjusting him, but otherwise, I would just say Gul'das is the only weak unit. So as we can see, this deck, I mean, all its stuff it's pretty solid, right? So they are considered to be kind of a slightly weak deck. It's interesting to consider why. Like I think one of the reasons could be that because it's a combo deck, it's very hard to play. Like this is one of the decks that took me the longest amount of time to really be able to play it well consistently in a way that I was having success with it consistently. Because if you're keeping events for too long in your hand, suddenly you're going to be having nothing to play or being in a position in which really you're doing nothing. You're just getting overwhelmed, and then you're going to say like, yeah, this deck is bad. But if you analyze it many times, it's like, yeah, like you shouldn't have kept those two events in your hand, like, or three events, because many times you keep two events and then you just don't draw two more events, right? Things like that. One of the main weaknesses it has is the mobility. Like, you really struggle. You want to move so much more, and then you're just limited by the three moves with the type of plays you're trying to do. And then you rely, because it's a combo deck, many times you rely on having the events in a correct order. Like, you want to have those pyres when you have like a purge, or when you have like a blood combo. But the blood combo, you want to have it when you have like at least three or more units in your hand. So it's hard to get the right order of cards in your hand to do those big combo plays, but you can be discarding in such a way to maximize the chances of that. Like, there's a way to play this deck in which you have to be making some sacrifices, some compromises on which combo you're going to go for, and then you have to commit to trying to build your hand toward that combo. And sometimes, like, you will just not get the remaining elements. So I guess that's the reason, right? Like, sometimes even if you do that, hoping to draw the missing pieces of that big turn, it will simply not come, and you will just have to play them all in a like suboptimal way. Because I guess because of that, I would say you could make the argument that for competitive, they're not the greatest fit. Like for competitive, at least they would say like B level. But the general power level, I would be like in between A and B. Maybe what would make me definitely say that they are on A is if Red Talus, not sure if he has, maybe his health could be a little bit higher, especially because he's going to be using that as a resource. And sometimes, like, he could always get, you always have to contend to the fact that they can try to get to him and just deal some extra damage. So based on the fact that they've been testing him in tournaments with more life, like 15, 14, 13, it would make me think that he's probably a little bit low on life. Like, he could use one or two more life to be at a power level that brings him closer to the rest of the factions. And between that and fixing at least Gul'das so that he's viable in some scenarios, or plays well with some of the like the blood summon combos type of situations, uh, with those fixes, I would say, like, yeah, definitely, like, they're A tier because everything else in the deck has a lot of synergy. They have some really strong plays. But without that, and with the reliance on the right things for combos, I would say they are on B tier. What do you think?
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like the faction can be very powerful, and it's interesting to think about, like, like what is dragging it down, because yeah, I think you're right. It really just only is that those games where it's just like so tough to get the combo pieces, and they're just not coming. They're just like, you have some events buried. So yeah, I think it's it's sort of the opposite Cave Goblins problem of just of trying to build that hand, and it just not coming. I think that power level wise, that's only enough. I think that that's only enough downside to like maybe knock them to A minus. I think they're pretty. Yeah. So I would put them in A for power level. And then concede that in competitive play it can be tougher.
Yeah, and you're right. Like, if we had an A minus, I would say they are A minus, because that's kind of, I mean, maybe we should add an A minus for the ones that they're not entirely underpowered, but they are slightly underpowered just because of a tiny set of things that could put them right where they would be able to compete. So yeah, this guys would be the example, because adding like one, two more life to Red Talus is not like, it's not going to completely change the way the deck plays or anything. Like, adding that slight change on one of the champions won't really change the deck too much, right? It would just give you one more tool for some scenarios. So they're not to the point, and the variants, it's not as bad as the goblins, right? Like, these guys can, if you know how to discard and not like hold like certain events, things like that, you can consistently be getting some good games with these guys. And so, yeah, that's right. I wouldn't want to send them all the way to B, but they are missing like a tiny set of things to be at A, which is where we say Vex could be at their maximum, at their ideal potential. Let's just call it ideal potential on A, in which all the cards are playable, all the cards have a role, and they are able to compete with any of the decks.
All right, we've made an A minus tier. We're going on the fly as we figure it out. And I think the only other like interesting thing to note about Retalis is what you said at the beginning of this is a hard faction to talk about balance. And frankly, like I'm just amazed that this came out in the master set and that it is even remotely balanced with an ability like Retalis. In my opinion, no other summoner has an ability that is just like this game shattering and just how it changes it. Like just being able to convert health to extra units. It's like for that to be balanced in an economic gain game and not either just like not be near good enough or be way too good, like Retalis like is just totally on par with other decks in terms of economy. Like if he has a good game going for him and has a bunch of carrier engines, there can just be an undying horde. And then there can be games where it's just like, yeah, you just kill every single undead unit and eventually they're busted. Another big weakness is just how they're just weak at a range and they need to get in there, and you can use that against them. But yeah,
Mhm.
I find it amazing that such a whack faction is actually pretty balanced in this game.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. And I think the thing that keeps them from being too broken is the fact that the like you're still limited to 3 moves in the game, right? So even though you're able to build this massive hordes of the undead, it's still hard to get them all to be relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, yeah, it would be crazy. And one thing to call out with the warrior, because there's been some conversations about the new Groke's warrior, which I've said in the past that he's a little bit busted and just completely breaks the baselines that existed in the past for melee units. And this is another unit that can get to those levels. But I would say the difference is that for this unit, you really like only get to those levels when you're doing the whole combos, right? Either the blood summon combo or the other combo, the pyre. So it's not something that you're gonna have guaranteed with every single warrior. When they come out, you're just gonna make them hit for 7. Like you will only be able to do that if you're playing the combo that same turn. Otherwise, they are usually hitting for 3 or 4, right? Like if at
Yeah.
least for 3, because you're gonna do your other attacks first, and most of the time kill one thing. And if you get the 2 kills on the when your other 2 attacks, this guy attacks for 4, and then they just reset, right? So if you manage to do some big thing and kill more than 2 things, then you get a permanent like bonus +1. I like that effect. Like it keeps it balanced, but then he also needs to survive. So then you have like the 3, 4 for that other turn, maybe get one more hit, but then it's hard to keep them alive after that. So on most of the games, you're able to do 2 combos per game. Like those 2 of those combo plays, like at least 1 blood summons and at least 1 pyre type of turn. Like I would say that's the average that you'll see on the games with these guys. So you'll get 2 turns in which your warriors are just like monsters. And most of the times, like the strategy is just to stay outside of the range of the warriors, and once they do those big combos, just try to like kill the warriors as fast as possible. But it's not like the 4 warriors that always come out at 7 immediately and then they just hit you for 7. And so that I would say there's a big difference there, just because of the effort, how much you have to work to get that 6 or 7 melee unit compared to the new one that it's minimum effort and then you're hitting for 6.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah. All right, let's see the next one, the Phoenix Elves.
I don't know why they put this one here in the order. Do you want to? This annoys me. Can we just do master set first? Can we do polar dwarfs? Because
Yeah,
Phoenix
yeah.
elves are wave 2 technically.
Oh, got it, yeah. All right, so let's take a look at the dwarves. So this deck is one that they have already like taken some steps to balance it out. So we have Svara, which is a summoner that is like central to the strategy from like using her move ability. It's interesting. Like she doesn't have to be attacking, but you have to be moving her to keep reshaping the board. She has the average amount of health. Maybe I guess the 12 might be the slight. I think 11 might be the average. Or yeah, probably 11 or 12. I think 12 would be the average if we
Yeah,
consider all the
I,
ones
I
that
think
have
that's right.
14. Yeah. And then she has a combo which is extremely strong. So the Ice Ram Glacial Shift combo, which I think it's costed properly because even though it costs 0, you have to build the ice golems for it, keep them alive, build your gates, and be positioned in such a way that you're within the 3 space range and all that. So it is not trivial to do the combo, right? So a combo that is super gratifying, you have to work for it. It takes a lot of time. Like many times when you see people trying to see how they're going to do that, it takes a lot
Yeah.
of effort. So I think it's pretty balanced that, and it's really strong. It's the main strength, I would say, of the deck because it allows you to reshape the board in a turn.
Yeah.
And you have the parapets, which play perfectly to the structure theme, allow you to attack with Svara so that she's not just staying all the time, like not attacking every single time in any single time in the game. So it's pretty cool so that she's able to get into the action. Then you have Ice Repair to be able to. This is interesting because this is kind of a heal event, right? So this is something that we'll compare with the mass heal. So in here, you're setting up an event, a certain baseline for healing 2 damage from this is structures, right? But the thing of this deck is that you're always going to have ice golems, which is almost kind of the heart of the deck in a certain way. And so you're going to be healing these guys, and you won't be playing that event if you're just healing like 2 life. Most of the time, you're going to be healing more than 2 life on units on the ice golems. So you're already setting up a baseline of healing like 3 to 4 health for a single card with 0 magic. Plus, you're getting the benefits on parapets or gates, which is not that significant, but it still gives you extra value. And all of that, you're getting it for 0 magic. So this is something important to keep in mind once we get to mass heal.
Yeah, and I think it's
Because
also
now this is
interesting.
a baseline for healing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's also interesting, like the setup required because like it seems like when I just see Ice Repair, I'm like, this card has to just be like insane. Like this has to like just how much value you could get out of this for every structure. But like it actually ends up being one of the cards that like I feel like I discard the most as far like it just like you need that there requires the specific situation or setup where you have damage on multiple ice golems and your opponents normally know to focus fire. So it's got that like a card also has that give and take of not only how much direct value does it give you either like healing or damaging, but also like how often can you get that or like what do you have to do to set that up. That's also part of the cost of a card.
Mhm. Exactly, and this one, like one of the reasons why the opponents usually focus on bringing down like fully the guy, like a golem, is because of ice repair, right? Like you don't want to leave damaged golems around because you know if you do that, they're going to be doing ice repair, and then just if they get more than 4 health healed across golems, it's devastating. Like it really hurts when they do that. One of the things that is interesting with this one is that you don't need any proximity to the golems. Like it just happens across the board, which is massive. So even though that's true, like most of the time, this is the event I discard at least one of them, because unless you're healing 3 or more life on golems, and then maybe if I'm only healing 3 on a golem, I also want to get some parapet or gate heal. It's not worth it. But the thing is, like, once you set up that situation with multiple of them and they were not able to bring them down because you only exposed one flank or something like that, it's an amazing card. All for 0. So you're healing like 3, 4 life. When you play it, you heal 3, 4 life plus all the structure damage that you heal and without even needing proximity, right? So it's setting up like what possible heal effect can be. I would say the restriction is that it only works on one of your common units. So that's the downside that it needs to have. Otherwise, it would be too crazy. And it's still, even though you're able to heal that much, we just saw like it's not a must play, right? This is something like with blasting, which even though it's super strong, it's situational. Like you need to build the correct situation. So when that situation is not there, then you just discard it.
Yeah.
So yeah, so then we also have on the units. In here, we can see one of the baselines for 3 magic melee units. I believe it's 5/3. I would say that's the baseline. And plus positive ability, right? So 5/3 positive, because, well, 5/2 for 2 is one of the standards, but only for one more magic, just getting one more melee would be like insignificant. So you get a positive ability. Like with the bearers, it's just being able to trample something. That means that unless the bearers are able to trample something when they come out, they are they are weak, right? Like they're not a
Yeah.
great unit to play unless you're able to exploit the trample. Or then you have the 2/2 for 0 with the Ice Smith with a positive ability that has synergy with the bear or the golem. Most of the time, you really want to play with the bear so that the bear, you have better chances there. The Ice Golem is just kind of like the foundational unit of the deck, in which you're able to have summon out of it and then build like a fortress type of thing that has the synergy with a Frost Mage that it's another baseline for melee units. So this is something that is also relevant when we cover the Vanguard, because we know here that it's not uncommon to be able to get for 1 magic, 4 health, and a conditional range unit with a base of 1, but a condition that allows you to attack for 2, 3, or 4. Right? Like usually that's how you're going to be attacking this Frost Mages. It's really uncommon to only attack for 2. Most of the time they attack for 3. Many times they attack for 4. I think it's more often that they attack for 4 than attacking only for 2. So
Interesting.
this is important when we talk about the Citadel Archers.
Yeah. And I chime in as well that I think frost mages are over the curve. um and maybe you disagree, but for one magic just to like feels like pretty easily in this deck be able to get to like to be a 3/4 is just over the curve in terms of value. But in terms of the deck, that is the polar dwarf strength. Their strength is their ability to build up this fortress of high health units, as opposed to their strength is not anymore being able to assassinate summoners, or being able to get crazy amounts of like burst damage from a single row or something. Part of their strength is is their beefiness. So in my mind, this unit is too strong, but actually works in the deck because that is their strength.
Exactly. It makes the deck really work and be a strong deck. It is indeed pretty strong, right? Like that's the thing with the conditional cards, in which if you're able to fulfill the condition, that is really easy to do with this deck because it's all about structures. Then this guy becomes like a 1 magic 4/3. So that's way above the average, right? Like
Yeah.
usually it's 2/3, and this guy is 4/3 with very little work, right? So that's and sometimes it can be even more. But that's kind of like this is one of the first cards that came out, right? Like it sets up a standard for conditional units, and I think it works well on the deck because they do need the extra power. Like otherwise, the deck would probably feel too weak. Like the other units just attacking for 2 melee, usually you struggle with that. Usually, also the theme is a little bit of okay, you have high health, but your attack values are not going to be massive. So this guy is only relevant. This gal, I can't do it again. Uh, if she's attacking for 3, otherwise, like it's not that like relevant in the game. So yeah, I would agree. But that she's really powerful. But the thing is, this is kind of the baseline now of what you get. Like I say that having other decks that have like a 4 health, 1 melee, 1 ranged, that have a condition to be able to attack for more, it's really not that busted because we've seen like it would just be like a solid unit that you would be happy to play as long as you're able to fulfill the condition. And ideally, you wouldn't want the condition to be as easy to achieve, but really, like with a Frost Mage, it's super easy to achieve that. And it's still really not broken in a way that you say, like, yeah, this deck is just busted because of those mages, right? I think it doesn't get to that point.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. I think yeah, the only thing I add is like what when comparing the power level, you're also just thinking about what other strength a deck has. Like, is it okay for this card is it okay for the condition to be so easy here? For instance, like, so, when we talk about the cloaks, I'd say like, well, there's some conditions that are just super easy to fulfill, and then also the deck has this totally other strength of being able to assassinate super easily, and has all these strengths, as opposed to this just this unit being the shtick of the deck in itself.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I mean, just to close out the champions, like they have Jarmund, which we can see the baseline was 7 life, 3 melee. So on his attack, like he would just the stats like would place them below that, but that is because his ability is just a damage dealing ability that is extremely strong. And with that ability during a game, you're going to be able to deal like a lot of damage. Like at least worst case scenario, you're dealing 1 per turn. Most of the times, you're dealing 2. It's not uncommon to be dealing 3. So this guy just places this guy as an like one of the best champions, in my opinion, in the like I mean at least in the core set in the first decks. And maybe like some people would even say that he's too strong. I don't think so because you do have to work for his effect. Like do need to have like a lot of those gates around and be in a position in which they are in contact with the opponent, which is where you use the ice ram, glacial shift. So he's very strong, but like you have to work for it, and it's gratifying to be able to do that. And he's not super resistant. His damage input is not amazing. Like so it balances it out with the ice shard. Oleg is right on the baseline of the 5, and then he has a positive ability, like the 5/3 with a positive ability. And his ability is not one that gives you direct like magic benefits or resource benefits like cards, magic, things like that, like all other champions at this rate. But it gives you life on the golems, which in some games it's relevant. I think it puts him in that position in which he's a situational champ. Like if you manage to have like multiple ice golems alive, this guy is awesome. And otherwise, many times you just prefer to discard him to play some of the other commons. And the only card that I think is just not costed properly, like there's hard to make the argument that it's balanced in any way, like Nadiana at 6. So you just have like 7 life, which is what you usually get for 5 magic. And then you have 2 attack, which most of the time, really, you're going to be getting +2, +3. But plus, like if you're attacking for 4, that would be the equivalent of a 3 melee unit, which is what you get for 5 magic, right? So for 6 magic, you're barely getting what you would be getting for 5 magic on the stats perspective, like the 4 range and 7 health. So yeah, I think she definitely needs to be adjusted. It's the only card that I think it's not balanced based on what the champions are able to do nowadays. It's very rare to be able to get her to have like +5, +6, like those type of scenarios rarely happen, and they don't really happen in competitive games. It's less often that you'll see that. So I think that's the only card that is not in line with the baseline of power that champions have nowadays. But even with that card being that way, I would still say that these guys are A tier. Now with the fixes to the combo, they're not too broken, but they have great synergy. They have a great strategy that is able to it's easy to implement consistently because it's a defensive thing that you play the long game, right? Like when you're playing these guys, you're really not planning on a short game. You're planning on building, and so uh, you have time to get to those cards. You have many defensive cards to be playing in the meantime. Those ice golems, those frost mages. The birds are too expensive to play many of them, but even those guys allow you to be exchanging and sometimes just go into some offensive type of way, or on the defensive play, like the bear is great because then you are able to do the trample on whatever was close to you. So it has plays really well on the theme that is easy to implement consistently. So I would definitely say they are A tier. I don't think they're overpowered. They don't have anything broken, anything that is above that baseline. Like with the frost mage, we said that it was really strong because the conditional state is easy to fulfill, but it's still a conditional state, right? That getting it and you don't have like it's the only range unit too. So that's also the thing. Like uh, everything else is melee, so many times like that's the only unit that they have for attacks when unless people are trying to rush them. So it balances out some of the other weaknesses the deck would have because of their strategy. So yeah, A tier for sure in this guys.
Yep, I'm with you. Throw them over there. I've heard some recent players say that they feel like Nadiana might actually be better, like in the current meta than than we've thought in the past. But that's a discussion I'd leave for the other day. I also never play her,
Yeah,
but I've
I
heard
wouldn't think
whispers.
that because it doesn't matter what the opponent has. Like if you're not able to like give her +4, then she's not really getting you the value from paying 6 magic, and it's really hard to get to that point, right? Hit that critical mass. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I wonder if there's certain playstyles that can do it more easily, but I really don't know enough to say. um,
yeah, and just the only place I really sacrificing like discarding all your bursts and your ice meats to be able to hit her, and then just try to amass a lot of gates and have them survive.
yeah.
Like you pretty much have to commit to playing her. So starting a game and saying like I'm gonna play Nadiana, I'm just gonna discard crazily to play her, and then not discard any of the ice golems or your gates because you cannot discard your normal gates if you're gonna play her if you really want to get crazy value. And in this deck, many times you want to discard some of those 5 gates because you have the golems and you want to play as many golems as you can. So it's weird. I mean, you can do that just for fun if you're playing like super casual, right? Like that, it's fun to play like see how high you can go with Nadiana. But in a serious game, like she won't really give you what you paid for.
I got you. I got you.
Yeah.
Want
All
to do
right. Let's
Savannah
get to the
Elves?
next. Yeah, let's do the Savannah Elves. All right, so let's see. So in here we have a champion that also has the wait. No, this is the summoner that has an ability that relies on him moving. So it gives you like the boost. He has slightly below average health. It was probably justified due to the fact that he attacks for 5. That's super high for a summoner. The base attack, like I think the baseline for attacks on summoner 5 is as high as they go without some conditional effect, right? Like I don't think there's any summoner that just has 6. So this is as high as you can go on the ranged attacks. Then his epic event is works well with some of the combos you can do with the other events. So I think having 1 magic for that event it's definitely fair. I mean, worst case, you're getting like +4 attack, which means it's almost like killing one big unit. Or, but the reality is that many times you'll be getting it with dual attack with the swift shot of the archer. So you're getting like double, like 2 attacks with the plus. So 1 magic is definitely the right value for this type of strong effect. But the good thing is that it's still situational. So many times it's not like a must play thing. Like many times the situation is not there, you discard it and hope that you're able to play the second one. Then you get the events that try to play out to all this stuff, like the entangling. You have to set it up with 2 units, give them their own effects. Pretty cool event. It makes sense for it to be 0 because sometimes you're going to be able to set it up for like extremely powerful combos. Sometimes you're just going to be getting mild value out of it. So it's at that point in which it's easy to play it in many ways, even if it's not maximizing value. Growth just plays to the deck theme of boosts. So this one for 1 card, it all varies how many boosts you can get, right? So I would say if you get 2 or 3 boosts, at least 3 I like to get with it, then 1 card for 3 boosts is something I'm willing to pay. If I get less than that, I prefer to discard it. Then we have weaving, which is an event that allows you to do combos, allows you to summon out of unexpected places. So it gives the deck a lot of versatility. Otherwise, it's easier to predict how far they can reach, they can go. And I mean, they have the rhinos. Then on the common units, the rhinos, which they can move more than usual, but they don't really hit that hard. So it's not like you're terrified of them at the beginning of the game. But it's a solid unit, right? It's a 2/5, so that's the baseline with trample that then you're able to really get value out, get more damage out of them because you can put boosts on them. at least many times you can get a single trample and then attack with them. So I would say it doesn't make them just too busted because it's already a 2/5, but it has a positive effect that it's easy to at least get one damage out of before they kill them. Many times you get more than one damage if you invest a little bit in them. So that's a cool thing. You have to invest in them, right? Like they don't come with the to the board with any boost. So you get those extra damages if you put some boost on them. And in this deck, it's not like you're swimming in boost. I think it has a balanced boost economy that you have to make compromises all the time on how you use your boosts. And you
Mhm.
always feel like you could use more boosts. Like you always feel like you need more and more.
Yeah, yeah.
The archer is one of the strongest units. It also sets a baseline for what you can get for 2 magic on range units because the we have seen that you either get the 4 ranged, but you get three health for 2 magic. This guy, like you get the extra the gal, okay, this gal, you get 4 health. You get a 1 extra 1, but to get the 4 range, you need to sacrifice 1 move, right? So it's one of those conditionals that you have to give something away to get the extra effect. And then if you do that, she's above the baseline of what you can get for a two range unit. So it's a great trade. Like everyone loves this unit. Like you're gonna be playing it a lot. It's one of the strongest range units in the game, and it plays really well with the combos that the deck can do to that inflate the power of the unit. Finally, the Linus, very solid unit for melee. You get the 2 magic, 3 health, 3 attack. I'm out saying 3 health because every time that you play it, it has to come and attack something. You wouldn't just play it to just come down and not do anything. So you're going to start at that 3/3. And the positive ability that it has is the potential to have more. Right. So if you invest that boost economy, she's going to start at least at 4/3, even 5/3, and sometimes, and that's when it gets really like it feels really strong, right? Like, but the thing is, you're investing your boost economy in that unit, and you're not able to have that boost economy into too many units at the same time. So I think it's still balanced because of that. Finally, the champs, I think they're most of them are playable. Like Mitikiryu, we can see that. So we said baseline 7/3 4/5. He has like the extra attack, and then doesn't have any ability that gives you straight like magic advantage or card advantage. I guess that's why you get the extra attack. But the ability is still super solid in this deck. If you line up your cards properly, you can get the extra boost. And being able to use the withdraw ability, which is super flexible from the perspective that even if you haven't boosted it, you can just sacrifice 1 magic if for a big play, right? Or just to protect the Vua. So I think this champion is slightly above the curve of, or actually close to the curve of the baseline for a champ, but might be slightly above just because of how powerful it is to have like 4 melee and then be able to do something like withdraw by just spending like 1 boost. It's a cheap cost when you paid with boost. Makindaru, I think it's also above slightly above the baseline, right? For 5 magic, you usually get something like 7 health and 4 ranged. Right? 4 ranged, I would say, from the probabilities perspective, is similar to 3 melee. So we can see with her that you get the 4 range just by sacrificing the move or putting boost on her, which is not hard. And then she has 9 life, which is definitely above the baseline. So that just makes her a strong champion. And you can see how many people play her. Like it's very common to see her being played just because she is good value for what you pay. Only Meaty Momwe is the one that is a flop. Like it gives you nothing for 8 magic. Like for 8, even like at 6 magic, it will probably still not be ideal. Right? Like the only thing you have is okay. He has high health, but he's really not great for like the attack. It's gonna take time to get him into something higher that is relevant. Trample, if he's only moving 2 spaces, not going to be relevant. So this is a champ that could definitely get some adjustments just to make him playable, at least in some situations. because any dead card, even if this deck is already really strong, it's not good for the game to have cards which are useless and then are just automatically just one magic and not a real card that you will be able to play. So there are many ways to play fix that one. We don't need to get into that, but we can see how like this deck is one of the strongest ones, right? Like two champions are like very playable. You want to play them whenever you can. Like it's a viable champion to play. Sometimes the only reason you don't play them is because the common units are so good that you would rather just play those common units. Like they're so solid. They feel like mini champions. Like when you bring down like a 6/3 lion, it feels like a lioness, mini champion. So the only weakness I would say is that because they're so good, at least they're two magic. They don't have like cheap units except for the Spirit Mage, which I didn't mention. But this is just the baseline: 2 health, 3 magic, positive ability, which really just gives you boost, which is what this deck needs. So it plays well with the rest of the deck. It has the synergy to generate boost. So everything is really strong. Like we can see, it has combos, it has solid units, it has solid champs, it has powerful events that play well with each other. So we can see why this was the original S tier deck, right? It has no really, we don't see any downside other than one card that is unplayable, and that is why I would say it makes sense to just to nerf them a little bit from the Abuashi perspective, because the only, I mean, disadvantage of Abua is he doesn't have a lot of health. So you usually want to try to get to him because he attacks really hard. So you want to get him into a low amount of health so that they cannot use him that much. They cannot risk him, and they don't have ways of protecting him when he attacks. So that's the only weakness. But at 5 range, he can just blow up anything that you manage to get all the way to the back to hit him. This is the type of deck that can just play all the way to the back and loves the time to play the boost farming. So when you play against them, you have to be the aggressor, right? Most decks have to be the aggressors, try to put pressure on them, and it's hard to put that pressure and bring those units all the way to the back. And when you do, like they can just blow them up really easily with a Buashi. At 5 range, you can consistently get 3 damage most of the time, sometimes even 4, with a decent amount of like the percentages, right? It's not uncommon to see like a 4 range hit. Most of the time it's going to be 3. So sending a Bua to 4 range, I think, would fix this deck in which all the cards are super strong and the summoner is also super strong. At 4, he can still play a role, but not be that busted, because at that point, even the like 4, the damage is rare. Getting 3 happens, but it's not going to be super consistent. So sometimes you will just be hitting for 2. So that means that you cannot be one-shotting every unit that makes it all the way to the back. So this deck, I would say it's S tier in competitive. It's consistent because all the cards are good by themselves. Like you don't need any specific order for them to be good. If you get like things in a certain order, you can just do some busted combos, but you can hold them too. Like when you get one entangling, you can just hold it, because any creature that you get, any unit, it's going to be good to play. Like you won't need some other units to make them good. So that's why this deck, I would say it's S tier, and I would even say nerfing them so that they're not that busted and they're closer to an A tier would be healthy if you were looking for a balanced meta game.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like everyone agrees Abua is too strong, but what exactly to do about that is a bit harder, and it seems like nerfing the summoner is the easiest path, just because that's only historically we've only ever changed summoners or events, that like changing the commons is 4 physical cards that would need to be printed if it's a balanced errata. I'm curious though, like, do you think if we could tweak the commons, do you think you would? Do you think that would be a better approach, or to flesh that out, like thinking about like where does the power really come from Abua. And like, let's say the border archers were worse. I'm not really going to define exactly how they would be worse because I don't, because there's not an easy way to change that. But let's just say it was another unit that was just a good ranged unit for two. Because I think border archers are over the curve. Not by themselves, like totally fair to have to prepare instead of Swiss shot. Totally fair, but in the deck, it's just way too easy to get a boost to them. Same with Mickey Endo. I would nerf for health, but let's say like we make border archers just some other good ranged unit. Like, is that what's the strength of a Bua? Like, is that taking away his strength of like having this like really strong ranged unit fortress, or we also have the strength of the combo of the Chant of Entangling, Chant of Power combo. Would that be good for the deck to force you to sort of have to do more combo plays to win on value, or would that not be fair to Abua to cut out probably the best value econ unit being the border archer?
Yeah, it would probably wouldn't be great because it's not like it's just slightly above the average once you pay the condition, right? So there's a cost at least for it. So it's not a big condition to like. It's not a big giveaway. Just giving one move for the what you get. It's more valuable, and there are other ways of adding the boost, but they are not like busted in themselves. Like they're still within the baseline of without the condition, they are slightly above average. With the condition, they are slightly above average. And you have to like do something for those conditions. Like the same thing with the lion. Like if the lion only comes down and attacks and it's a 3/3, then it's below average because you can always get for 2 magic a 3/3 with something else that does damage or does something like that. So you really need to also work on it with giving other boosts that you were from Abu or other things or the Spirit Mage. Same thing with the Rhino. Like it's something that I think they play well. It's just they're strong because all the units once you invest in them a little bit, become above average units, and they have a lot of versatility with what they can do. Like with the Rhino has that extended move that is unstoppable, right? Like they can just get over the like go through the units and reach whatever they want to reach. So that opens you like a window to finish the opponent, to do that sometimes with entangling combo. Then you have that like powerful combo play between the two events, entangling and a +1 event, like +1 for each boost. So that's a very powerful play that sometimes just finishes the game immediately, especially when they have to come at you. So that's also something that makes them really strong. Like the decks that are able to just play their own game on the back
Yeah,
are really strong because then they don't care if the other opponent is like has good defense or not. Like they do their own thing, and how easy it will be to do it just depends on how aggressive the other deck is. Right? So it just uh, so that's why even the champions are slightly above the curve, right? Like we see based on what we were talking about, like the 7/3 kind of being the standard. Like
yeah,
Mitikir is slightly above. Like you sacrifice something which his ability doesn't give you like an immediate like value from a card that you get back or something like that. But then you have withdraw. So every single card is really strong by itself. It's slightly above average once you invest in it. And your events, some of them are events that I mean, two of them are team players, like Growth and Weaving are
yeah,
situational, but you also get value for the other cards. Like they just make the other cards stronger, allow you to do unexpected plays with Weaving, which is another just tool that you have, right? Like if the deck didn't have that, then it's easy to predict what they can do and how to play around that. So you don't even have that. Like they do have tools for that. And then once you get all the way to the back, then the summoner is one of the strongest in the game, like on their baseline stats that just completely destroy your units, right? That you struggle so much to go all the way to the back. It's not easy to get all the way to the back and hit Abua. So that's why I would say the easiest way. There
yeah.
isn't like a big issue with all the other units. It's not like the Abua is by itself like busted at 5, but it's the easiest way to just nerf it down a little bit so that not every single card is just above average on the deck.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely I'm with you there. That's the easiest way. And a big nerf just to not have a Bua be so powerful in the end game. The only other thing
Yeah.
that occurs to me to mention is something that you said at some point being like whether boost engines, like a deck, thinking about decks that are boost engines and whether or not that is balanced, whether or not like the amount of boosts you're getting and what you're getting for a boost seems fair. And Abua seems like an example of a deck where yeah, it's fair. What you're getting. Of course, we say all these things are fair and within the spectrum, and then somehow the deck ends up at S tier. So a bunch of things that are just like a little bit too good add up. But um, with
Yeah.
with Abua, you're able to get you're getting one boost a turn, and then your other ways of getting boost are spirit mages, which is also one boost a turn, or later like half a boost a turn, I guess. And then growth and weaving, which are um, also just like not giving you too many boosts, giving you 2 to 3, and like with growth, you're probably not playing if it has 3. I think in particular, what's interesting is the fact that like how easy it is to get a bunch of boosts on a single unit, like the rhinos and because that's another thing you have to think about, like boost economies, to like just how easy it is to just like shimmy boosts around where you want them. Getting 5 boosts on a rhino or a lion, like it takes quite a bit of time. Like I mean, it's easy insofar as like you're never gonna go Savannah Elves game where you don't see like a 5 boosted rhino or lioness, but it takes a few turns to accumulate those boosts on a Bua to be able to do that. The deck is very good at getting 1 boost easily, which is why I think why I consider archers like over the curve in that is it's very easy to just get 1 boost on an archer, but things like getting a rhinoceros or lioness up to 5 takes a lot more effort for the deck, which makes it feel balanced. So I
Mhm.
don't know. I think
Exactly.
that that's something to keep in mind of like where
Yeah.
it's really tough to assess like whether a boost economy is balanced or not. Cough cough. Deepwood Grokes we'll be talking about 8 hours.
Yeah.
But
I
I
agree
think it works.
completely. Exactly. I agree completely with that boost economy thing you mentioned. Like in this deck, you really have to work to accumulate them. And I mean, even the archer, like you could just do the move, but the thing is, they have to be already within your summoning spot range, which is something that you usually try to avoid in this matchup just because how easy it is. But otherwise, like if they have to move the archer and then use a Bua, like it doesn't feel that busted that way. And yeah, this is a perfect example of a deck that has like a good boost economy. You always feel like you have to work for it.
Yeah.
You never feel like you have too many. Compared with the Grogs, like sometimes with the Grogs, you end up with like 10 boost on the summoner, and you're like just like lol, like this is ridiculous. Like you just have that and then have multiple potions with boost and have and that's very common with the Grogs, right? Like, but with this decks, like that never really happened. You were always like starving for more boost and more boost because you had to be struggling to get them, and you would use them, and then immediately, like they would eventually deal with those, and you had to start amassing them again in another one. So it's rare that you end up with an excess of boost in any game of Savannah Elves.
Yeah.
But you know, I think in the last tournaments they did the nerf, and it did work with the Savannah Elves. It sent them close to the 50 like 50 to 55, and before that I think they were closer to 60 the tournaments before. So that's probably the easiest way just to tune it down, because messing with the other cards would probably, like, that balance you have between the events, the units, the boost, and all that stuff. I think that's a solid one. So if you just lower Abua so that he's not such a beast that is able to just blow up anything that manages to break into his area, that would be enough. And even like improving meaty would just make all the cards playable. And I mean, even I mean, it's unnecessary, but if you think about it, Makinda having 9 life, does that even make it, like, why does she have so much life? Like,
Yeah. No, I think she's
it's not
overpowered.
worth, yeah, it's not worth making a change for something like that with the implications of actually changing a card. But if this was just digital, like if we could just make the changes digital in a mod, I mean, I would file like a motion for people to vote on, for like the testers or whatever, saying like, hey, wouldn't it make more sense to have Makinda at 8 life? Right? For that value, for that cost, 9 seems a little bit too much. But I mean, for a physical reprinting, it wouldn't make sense for such a small thing or champ. But like Meaty is obviously needs a fix. Even if it makes them stronger slightly, it would be okay at least for it to be a situational champion that there are some cases that you would say like, yeah, I'm gonna play this guy. Yeah, I'm gonna get some value out of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, up to debate what the fix would be and how effective, and always the tournament. Sometimes it's not a ton of data, so it's not conclusive. But yeah, could definitely be more testing. Yeah, and Abua change is something that I would like to see. I'm hoping at some point down the lines we get a similar errata of just like two summoners and like I like in a Bua 4/3 attack, and then also like a starting setup change to just make it more consistent, the first versus second. I think I would like to see that. It's sort of a tacked on change to the deck, but it would help. No
Yeah,
reason
and
not
if you're
to.
changing the summoner, it's easy to change the starting setup, right? Because it's on the same
Exactly.
card, I believe, like in
Exactly.
the back. So this definitely, because it's too much of a difference if they go first or not, with having such a thing as a lioness there that can just become a monster immediately or just die immediately. So you would expect it would make sense to also fix that if they do that. Hopefully
Yeah.
they do it. I think they were probably thinking about that, but who knows where their priorities are in regards to errata and changing things.
Yeah, yeah,
So let's take a look at
absolutely.
the next
Yeah,
one. What do we have next?
maybe real quick as the tease for, or one thing I wanted to mention in the boost economy thing is we mentioned like Deepwood Grokes. It seems way too easy to be rolling in boosts. Fungal Dwarves are another deck where you are absolutely rolling in boosts, but Fungal Dwarves I actually think is also a very well balanced boost economy, and they are fair. And I think that stay tuned for that discussion, but that leads to the complexity of like how exactly your deck is using boosts. Maybe a boost is less valuable in that deck versus a Savannah Elves deck, but stay tuned for that. Boost decks are hard to talk about. um
Yeah, exactly.
and
And
yeah, go ahead.
we can cover the first 8 decks today. This is taking
Yeah,
longer than I thought it would take us. We can go through the
that
first eight, and then we
that
can do a
makes
part
sense.
two next week or something like that.
Okay, yeah, yeah, that I was thinking the same. Let's do Vanguards.
All right, so Vanguard. So yeah, a lot of things with this one. So they already fixed Sarah. I think now at 12 live, 3 attack. It's a fair balance for her ability, which is really strong, just getting units back. So that's at least equivalent. You could say every time she attacks, you get one magic, right? Technically, you're getting one card that you could either potentially discard or just use as a unit. She has a condition of having citadel units, which is fair. Otherwise, they might be like too strong. At least that gives the opponents a way of trying to stop that on the end game, so that it's not like the eternal bringing back of things. Then you got her event, like the +1 to everything. Pretty cool effect. Like you have boosts. Like if you manage to keep them alive, it lasts longer. Otherwise, it doesn't. I think zero magic makes sense for something like that. Most of the time, you're going to be getting like +5 attacks from it, like +5, like +3 on a turn or +2 because you attack with her and 2 more. It's hard to keep it going for more than one turn, but ideally you want to be able to get it the next turn. That's kind of like the objective. Then you have Renewed Hope, which is an awesome event. It's kind of like the heart of the deck as it stands because of so many weak cards. So it's a good event for Zero, right? It addresses some of the weaknesses that they have with mobility, with reach, with being able to attack and cover her. Like it allows you to open a lot of cool plays. Guarding is also a event that plays really well at Zero. It just defends your units, allows you to keep them alive for the judgment interactions. So pretty cool event. Has a limitation of the 3 spaces so that it's not too busted, so that you have to work for it, like keep everything in a certain distance. And then Mass Heal is this is the one that I think most people just agree like this is too weak because no one ever like you play it one every 20 games or something like that, just when the stars align and you're gonna be getting 6 health back or something like that. We know that in this game, most of the time people are gonna try to finish off a unit. One of the reasons is because people need the magic, like you're playing and you want to finish them off because you want the magic to have enough magic for the next turn. So that's one of the reasons. And well, when they have ways of healing them, that's another thing that motivates you to finish them off. So if you know that they have mass heal, you're gonna try to not leave any like units at 2, 3 life. So I think this event being at 0 would be completely fair because you won't really be able to get that many situations in which you get something completely broken. Like you won't be getting 8 life or 8 health healed or something like that, right? Like that's not going to happen often. Like most of the time, you're really going to be getting something like 4 life if you get lucky. So 4 life for one card, I think it makes sense. Like it's kind of what you're already getting with the wall event repair on the polar dwarves. Right, so I think if they do that, like this applies to all your units, but the fact is like it's hard to get too many units which are damaged because of what I was saying. Like they're gonna finish them off eventually. So if you're lucky, most of the time you only have 2 units that are damaged on the board, and you're gonna be able to heal 4 health out of them. You have the restriction of only 2 spaces, which makes it not that easy to get too many units. And even if you have multiple units, get them all within the range on that turn. So best case scenario would be that you get 3 units, but that's going to be really rare. So at healing like 3-4 life on average, if it costs 0, I think that would be the right cost. I think when they were building all this stuff, like some of the first decks, it was hard really to determine like how much should different things cost. And with heal, they probably thought it would be too strong if it was like that, because maybe they thought there would be a lot of units alive during the games. But we've seen that most of the units, like the opponent will try to just finish them off. Like they'll align the attacks to eventually kill them. So hard to get more than 2 units being healed. So
Yeah,
this
and
definitely makes it really like an almost automatic discard.
yeah, yeah, and I also see, I see where they were going there because like the vanguards are better at like forcing the opponent to do their attacks awkwardly than like the polar dwarves. Like it's with tools like protect, it's and with like just all these high health units. I do think it is easier to have to have more units that can be healed. But yeah, just I agree. The way it shakes out is it would it would be better at 0 cost. And
Mhm.
especially like I also think it's like, oh, would I always be holding it then? Would it be too good then? But I think you're right too. I think it's still situational. You still need to find that circumstance or try to create that circumstance where your opponent has to just like damage multiple units instead of finishing off units, which is sort of the default way to play. So yeah,
Mhm.
I'm with
Exactly.
you.
So you would still be discarding it because unless you already have that situation or you know it's going to happen, you don't want to be holding that. Like you just discard it because you need to keep bringing the expensive units. So it would just make it playable. It would probably see play like 30% of the games or 50 or something like that, which is good, right? Like that's what you expect from a healthy event. So that's one of the main weaknesses. Like they have a almost a dead card in that one. And then their units. So this is one of those decks that have very limited ranged game. So they rely on melee and they have limited mobility. So let's see what they have. So the knight, they have the standard of 2/5 or 2 with a positive ability, which is protect, which works really good with protect and engage. That combination works really well with Sarah because you want to be attacking with her, but you don't want her to be. You cannot put something in front afterwards unless you played Renewed Hope. So then you rely on the knights for that, right? So he's great. Then the paladin,
I'm curious.
which is you.
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt, but everyone always says knights are S tier. Citadel knights, like in particular, are just like a really good unit, and they have the 2/5 stat line, which you expect. Protect and engage are good abilities. Like, what's your opinion on that? Are Citadel knights like as crazy as people say they are, and why or why not? Or
I would say, yeah, I would say they are similar to the border archers, that they are above the baseline because the ability that they have, like the positive ability, is a very strong and useful ability, especially when you combine it with actually having something to protect, which means like having something that gives you value by attacking,
yeah,
which is Sarah. Like every time she attacks, 1 magic. So if you're not even able to attack her back because this guy is around, then it becomes pretty busted, right? Like that's when you see the value.
yeah, I
So I would
gotcha.
say because the ways in which you can end up using those abilities it ends up being just like above the baseline, stronger than your usual 2/5. Like the ability is really powerful, and more once you combine it with the rest of the events, like the guarding and like Sarah shooting and things like that. So yeah, it's the strongest unit in the deck. Really, like playing Vanguards right now with the other like weak units, like the Archer and the Priest, it's really just playing like Knight over and over, like a Knight, Knight, Knight. It's so strong that's why this deck is a little bit boring to play, because I mean, you just play the same thing over and over, like play 20
Yeah.
knights, and the strategy is just filling the board with knights, and yeah, that's not ideal, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So the paladin, then you have your heavy hitter. Like most decks try to have like something that hits for more than two. Otherwise, they're like a bit weak on the attack perspective. So it makes sense, like in this one. So we said like the baseline was like for two magic, a 3/3. With a positive ability, like a strong, decent ability that allows you to at least deal one more damage immediately. So this guy doesn't have like an ability like that. It's a pretty weak ability, so it makes sense that it compensates for that with an extra one life. So I would say like this is within, like this is the baseline. This unit is perfect for that. I guess the ability sometimes it's relevant, sometimes it's not. I guess it's supposed to play with the archer. Like if the archer was playable, then I guess having this could be more relevant.
Yeah.
And then we have the other two cards, which are some of the big issues with the deck. So I guess let's start with the one that is not such a big issue. So the priest is just the baseline, right? 0 magic, 2/2 with relatively positive ability. Like it's a moderately well, it's not that strong. It's a positive ability, but it's not super strong, right? Like that's what you expect from the 0/1. So it won't really give you any like extra damage or things like that, like give you resources. So this one allows you to heal units. And this is something that it's kind of like it's usable. It's kind of like hard to measure how strong it is, because you
Yeah.
do have to sacrifice a card for it, right? Like if you didn't have to sacrifice a card, it would probably might be just too strong, could be.
Yeah.
But once you have to give a card for it, it's almost like giving, okay, you're giving one magic and one attack for 2 life. Like that, I don't think that's good enough. I think it's pretty weak.
Yeah.
But if you have an effect like Judgment in play, then you can be getting 3 to 4 life out of it. So that becomes almost like getting like back your unit. The unit that was about to die, you got it back to full health. So that's worth 2 magic, right? So at that point, you're getting something worth it. Like you're getting a
Yeah.
2 magic unit for a single magic plus the attack. That
And
sometimes it's
yeah.
not such a big deal, but
Yeah, and it's also worth mentioning that if it was just like one magic, so discard one card to heal 2 health or sometimes more, that's also value. Because like on average for like to play a Citadel Paladin, you're paying 2 magic, you're also playing a card, and you're giving the opponent 1 magic when they kill it. So like we it's debatable how useful the metric is, but like the true cost of like a Citadel Paladin would be like 4, and so like for 4 magic you're getting 4 health, and so for just one card to get 2 health, that is value, like not necessarily not a ton. It's better for 3. So if it didn't require an attack, that can be valuable, which means that this is situational, because sometimes you're not in a position where you can get all 3 attacks, and so well, just having one of the attacks being healing, at least that is value. So yeah, this unit,
exactly.
it can be used, but it's not, it's situational by definition there.
Exactly. So it's not unplayable. And actually I wouldn't change anything on it, because the deck needs a 0 cost unit. So the stats are good, and the ability, as you just said, as you just explained, it's situational. Sometimes it will be good. Like by default, if you just get the two health and have to sacrifice like one attack, I would say slightly below average. But for example, if you're on the right situation that you were not even going to be able to attack the for 3, then that's not an issue anymore. Then it's just one card for the 2 health. Right. So with a paladin, I guess that's kind of already the cost of half of the paladin. So yeah, at that point you're getting what you're paying for, and sometimes you get more. Like once you get it with judgment, then at that point you're getting value, like you're getting
Yeah.
something decent. So that one is okay. It's a situational one. It's a cheap unit, gives you options when you just need something to throw out for like a quick hit, trying to finish off like a 2 health unit. So it has a role. But the main issue with the deck is the range unit. Like the decks at least need one range unit. It's hard to have a deck with all melee. I don't think there's any deck with every single card melee. And having a range unit that is a complete unbalanced card that makes it almost unplayable. There's only like a single situation that sometimes you play in because the card has so many cards. Well, so many cards which are automatic discards. Then sometimes you can play a Citadel Archer soon at the beginning of the game, and then you start like discarding all the stuff that you need to discard either way, meaning all the other Citadel Archers, the Priest, because most of the time you don't need the 4 of them. Like you need at least only one at most, maybe 2, so you discard the other ones. The champions, which we'll see, which are completely unbalanced, like they're useless, so you discard them. So if you're going to discard them either way just to get the magic, you might as well get some ranged attacks out of it, right? So that's the only situation where you play the archer. But in the middle of the game, like you're going to be running through your deck pretty fast, and then he's just useless. Like attacking for 1 is almost, 1 range is close to nothing. Costing 2 is huge because the knight and the paladin already cost 2. So it's really hard to have a deck that has 3 units that cost 2. Like the main challenges with the Savannah Elves is that like it's very expensive. Everything is so expensive. So you're always struggling. You're having enough magic to be able to keep it up. So in this case, like this guy gives you absolutely not the value that you would expect for 2 life. Like if he was on the baseline for a range, like the equivalent of a 5-2 melee would be a 5-3 range. That would be the baseline. So he's 5-1 with a conditional ability that on most of the cases will barely get you into the baseline. Like you'll discard 2 of your cards, he's going to become a 5-3. So that's just what you would expect by paying 2 magic. Right? Like you're barely getting to the baseline. So you have to discard like 3 or 4 cards to get anything better than that, which is not something that you can consistently do. It's hard to do for more than 1 or 2 turns. So this guy is awful. It's the main card that needs to be fixed to make this deck playable. And I mean, there are many ways of doing it. I would say like the priority would be for this deck to have a 1 magic unit. Even if you have whatever you have to lower to make it work, I would say yes. They just need to, just like the Polar Dwarves, have 1 magic unit. And I've said like really just make it like the Frost Mage. Like if he's just a 4-1, there's already that baseline with the conditional ability of having to discard. The truth is you won't be able to discard just because you start with 5 in your hand, and they need to be unique, like different units. That means that most of the time you'll be able to discard 2 or 3 of them. And many times you don't want to discard every one of them because you want the knight or something like that. So you're going to be discarding 2 or 3. So that just makes them like a 4-3, just like the Frost Mage most of the time. Best case scenario, it's going to be a 4-4 when you discard 3 of them. And the rare situations, like you'll discard a bit more. But I don't think like that would be breaking anything because you can only do that at the beginning of the game, like discarding 4 or 5 units per turn. Like really, you can just pull out like 2 or 3 times of that, and then your deck is already running things. So you have to start rethinking if you can keep doing that. So I think something like that would just make Vanguard like bringing it up to like 8 here. Well, not only that, like that, fixing mass heal so that you actually are able to use it and heal and makes it a bit harder for the opponent to get rid of your units. And the champions, like that's another issue. Like they only have 1 champion. It's an expensive champion. Colleen at 6, like she's good. Like she's the one that you go for. But yeah, she's not cheap, and that's the only one that you have. She's, I would say, on the baseline perfectly because okay, you pay the extra like from 5 to 6, you get the extra health and you get a super strong ability, right? So it makes sense for her to not have better stats because her ability just can potentially be too strong if you give her more. But the other 2 are just unplayable, right? So if just because of the high cost of the common units, I think it would make sense to make Jacob a three magic unit with whatever stats like you think would be balanced. Like you could do it. I don't think that's like 2 magic plus 1 strength is like too big of a deal for it to be a broken ability, because to really make it broken, that means that you're not playing anything else. Like you're avoiding playing more than one unit every now and then. So it's unlikely that people would be able to pull that off often. Most of the time, he will really just have like 3, 4 attack, 5. Like maybe he starts at 1 ranged attack and just has the same ability for 3 magic and just have 5 life to make it like Albus, in which most of the time he's going to be a 5/3 for 3. Like I think that would be healthy for this deck because it already has like high magic cost. But it will make it playable. It will give you ranged options that this deck desperately needs to also have some more ranged options.
Yeah.
And finally, Balna. That one, I mean, there's many ways of fixing this one. Like this one needs some massive revisions. No point in getting through those. Like there's many ways of making her playable. But at that point, if you fix all of those things, I think Vanguards would be an A tier that is able to like stand with most of the decks. It will have some better matches, some worse matches, but it would be like a super fun deck to play. It would be A tier. But without all of those, I would say like they are still a C tier.
Interesting. And yeah, so you think just having a little bit of more extra value here and there. I guess why C tier as opposed to B tier? Like what's the distinction you're drawing there?
Because you have like almost half of the deck being useless, like 40% of the deck is or something like that, in which are cards which you just automatically discard because they do nothing. And one of the main weaknesses of this deck, which is just part of the nature of the deck, like I wouldn't change that, is the fact that they are weak on the mobility perspective. Like they are pretty predictable. Like they only have one trick, which allows you to do things that are hard to defend against. So just the nature of that makes them hard. Like for them, it's hard to compete with decks with high mobility. It's good for them to have that because they are some of the, like it will be one of the strongest decks on the defense scale. I think there's this cards that one of the guys puts together. I think it's Lark or something like that I really love, in which
Yeah,
they have like attack, mobility, reach, and all that, and then he
I
tries to
think
grade
that's
them and all that stuff.
I think that's Colonel S,
So
I believe. Not sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
the colonel. Yeah, I think I've seen him too. Yeah, so those are pretty cool, and I would say that like these guys probably have some of the highest defense in the game, right? Some of the highest defense stats.
Yeah.
So especially if you fix some of these things and actually allow them to heal and do those things, uh, then they need to have weaknesses in other aspects, right? So they couldn't also have great reach. But without that extra mobility, it's hard to compete with some of the stronger decks. So that's why I would say, like, yeah, they cannot stand really even in the B tier. They're just too weak and too one-dimensional and too predictable. Like they only have one way of like one strategy. They can play it offensively or defensively, but there's only one thing they can do. And like most of the other cards are just going to be automatically discarded. And that's it, really. Like it's too bad that that deck is at that point because it's such a fun deck to play. It could be such a fun, even like this. Sometimes it's fun to play, but you get bored fast because it's always the same thing. But if it got fixed, like it would be an awesome deck. Like I would play it so much more, and I would really enjoy it. But I don't think they stand in the B here because have you seen like some of the Bs we've talked about an A? Like they are really solid and they just have like a few things that make them like a struggle in the competitive field. But
That's fair. Yeah.
the Vanguard, they have a lot of things that are just completely useless, and it's they just don't stand well against all the ones that have all the tricks and the mobility, and they can just um, yeah, just shuffle around the board. And then these guys without range units, one of the main reasons would be the lack of range units. So with the Archer being
Yeah, that's
unplayable
interesting.
and the Jacob being unplayable, like it's so frustrating sometimes with them. Like the opponent, all they have to do is get outside of the range of your like 2 movements from your gates, and then you're like, oh, I, I have nothing to do. I'm just going to take inactivity damage, even though I'm trying to move forward. But it's
Yeah.
just because I don't have any viable range units, and I
Yeah.
already discarded my archers, and I already did this, right? So that's why I wouldn't even say B, because they are I would say one of the most deeply flawed factions from the balancing of their cards. Like, notice how when we were describing many of the other ones, like the Fallen Kingdom and the Breakers, we talked about a lot of synergy with all the cards had synergy. Not
Yeah.
with this deck. Like,
Yeah.
this deck has little synergy. Like, it has a little bit, but compared to the other ones, it's not even close.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I wanted to, yeah, for the comment about being one dimensional, like there's a lot of decks that will focus on a single strategy, and Cave Goblins is the other one that we say one dimensional. Though I don't know, and you and me have talked a bit more. I don't know if you'd say that any of the other decks that we have are one dimensional in the same sense. And yeah, I wonder if just a better ranged game would just be a second dimension
Mhm.
for the vanguards to play. Is like, well, now I don't have to come at you with these Citadel Knights. Now I have this other option.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it would just open a lot of alternatives in how you position your units. Like right now, the only ways, unless they're coming at you, is like you have to rush at them, because if they create distance, you're screwed. Like, your units won't be able to even attack, right? If they create distance, so you have to rush forward to try to like take the midfield and plant gates. But with range units, like, you wouldn't have to be so desperate.
Yeah, yeah. I I think we should stop soon, but yeah, I also have, I have a bit more to say about the Archer, and for that, because it's so interesting, because especially with these like fortress decks, you want to be careful giving them a good range, a good range units. Like the High Elves are the example of that. Like the High Elves are very sim. The High Elves in many ways are what Sarah wants to be, with this fortress deck. But the High Elves do have a good ranged option, which is just any unit that is that is ranged that has both the Arbiter of War buff, and also tough is gonna be it's gonna be shooting for 3 and have 3 health and have tough, and that is good enough to compete with basically any deck at a range. So if you imagining like a 2/4 Citadel Archer, or just like if Vanguard's had a really strong unit, like a 4/3 ranged or something like that, like it could, yeah, like you just you want to be cautious, giving like fortress decks such powerful tools to sit at a range. And I think
Exactly.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So that would be too strong. Like that's why it has to be conditional with this type of
Mm,
decks. Like, the
interesting.
dwarves are
Yeah.
similar, in which they only have a single range unit, and that's enough, kind of like for the deck to be able to survive and have a
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
some range game. But with this one, it will be even worse than the other one, because with the other one, you are able to sustain the bonus. But with this one at 4/1, I would say just 4/1, right? Because it's not supposed to be like their main thing, and you're still getting the magic. So you would be able to have some attacks and have some alternatives, but you wouldn't be able to sustain that for too long, right? So if they try to like create a fortress and attack with the archers as 4/3s, like they wouldn't be able to do that more for like for a few turns. Like after 5 6 turns, like they would be running out of deck, and they would need to start changing that
Yeah.
approach.
That's
So I think
interesting.
that would balance it out at that point. Like if you
Yeah.
just make it a 4/1, or if you make it 2 attack, I guess it would have to be like 3 life and 2 attack, something like that, to try to balance that out.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. Like even if the archers were a really good unit, at least at the very end, they burn out. And yeah, and just to speak to Sarah overall, I have a lot of fun with Sarah. I enjoy her a lot. I think Renewed Hope is a lot of fun. Guarding Spirits is just like I don't know, it just very satisfying to try to set up very good Guarding Spirits turns where your opponent can't just
Mhm.
cheese it. And I also really like Sarah has an interesting take on the sun theme that is just get a lot of magic. Like there's there's no other deck that is like I feel like as much about just like discard heavy and get a bunch of magic because of course you can just reclaim units later. And so that theme of draw cards with paladins, discards them with archers, like that's what it wants to be. And archers can be very good. Like if you draw them early and you have the right hands for it and you draw those extra cards with paladins and suddenly they're hitting for like 4, like that can be incredibly powerful. And actually I think a great buff for Sarah would also be just having an archer in the starting setup. I think that would be a massive swing because just the best time to have a Citadel Archer is turn 1. And if it's just there in the starting setup, well, there you go. And that's interesting. Your proposition for 1 magic, 1/4 that would make that seem more fair because having two cost units in your starting setup is over what you would expect. But a 1 cost unit would suddenly be fine.
Exactly. It would be in line with what other decks have, which they have like a 2 magic and a 1 magic. So yeah, it would make sense because right now the archer, sometimes one of them is good because if you think about it, like the deck can only really sustain a single archer. And once you burn out like all the attacks that you can do, like big attacks, then you don't have enough deck. So the other ones really never get played. It's very rare to play the other ones. So, but it would make sense like having one of those guys in the opening setup would
Yeah.
be would make a big difference. And maybe the thing is, if you have 5 of those, how many can you actually play? Because like you're gonna run out of deck fast, so the other ones become obsolete. So maybe like limit the ability in such a way that cannot be abused, but just make it be able to attack for 2, like a 3/2 or something like that. And that way it would be useful even well not yeah, it would be useful even if you're not gonna keep abusing the ability. So if you go for him as the opening setup unit, then you need to make it in such a way that even in the mid advanced game, you can still attack with him and be like at least attack for 2 range. Otherwise, 1 is nothing,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
that's
But that's another story. Like there are many ways of many options for that one. The thing is, I would just say that it really needs to be 1 magic because the deck already has like the costs are too high and it just has like 2 and 0. It just feels weird there. Like having a 1 cost unit and the range unit being the range unit that you want to play more, it would just
yeah.
make sense.
Yeah, and just to finish the Citadel Archer tangent, I've heard testers say in the public server that that during playtesting, Citadel Archers were 2 costs 2/4s, and that was found to be too strong. That Citadel Archers being able to hit for 2 all of a sudden. Like on average, you're gonna have 2 units in hand that you can discard. You're able to get to 4 or maybe even higher if you're able to combo with the paladins or just have a lucky hand. That 2 magic 2/4 seem too strong. There's an argument that because they peter out and are not so good later on, that maybe even then it would be fine. But interesting to look at that history of just like this was seen as like once upon a time in testing this was like maybe the most powerful ranged unit, but then we didn't have quite the playtesting resources that we have now, and so it was unfortunately over
Yeah,
nerfed.
exactly. That's probably how it went because if you think about it, like attacking like a 4 health, 4 attack range, that's just what the border archer is, and they were testing it at the same time. And then
Yeah,
there really you just have to like sacrifice 1 move, which is, as you said, like not a big deal, like most of the time.
yeah,
So I guess maybe they thought it was too much when people were discarding, like were able to discard 4 cards
yeah.
to it, and then it was attacking for 6, and that's why they thought about that. But yeah, there was probably more of a lack of resources, and the times have changed with all this stuff. And yeah, like today, that would be the main one that this deck would benefit from.
Yeah, interesting. Well, Vexer, that's one full wave covered. I'm gonna go ahead and say I think we should call it for today instead of doing
Yeah,
2 more
I was gonna
factions.
tell you, like it's probably a good point to
Yeah,
stop on the first wave. And yeah, and next week maybe we can do like the second wave and part of the third one, something like that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, this definitely took more than I thought it would, but
yeah. Excellent. Well, but it's good to go in detail though. This is interesting and to and
Yeah,
to
because that way at least
yeah.
we're justifying why we say it's A, B, or C or whatever, right? Like we're saying like why it's strong, why it's weak, and making the argument. I guess so.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
valuable.
yeah, and it's tough still because like I feel like there's room for each of this for each of these factions to go further because we have the cards and I'm glad we're going over that. But then like talking about the faction's power level as a whole, I think there's even more room for discussion, and I think there's other people in the community that would disagree with where we've put some of these just in terms of the faction's power level as a whole with some of the synergies and then this discussion, as we said, like doesn't even get into like the meta and competitive play. Like, are these factions good against the S tier factions? Do they have too much variance? And then like thinking about every single matchup that this faction possibly has. Like, there's so much more to have to this discussion, and even though we have just spent 3 hours only talking about six factions, I do feel like we've only sort of scratched the surface. But I'm glad that we're able to
Yeah,
at
that's
least put that much time to.
it's,
Yeah.
I can't believe I thought we were going to be able to cover all of them in like 2 hours.
Yeah, yeah, there's always stuff to talk about.
So once we go through all of them, we can then just talk a little bit about like the competitive meta, like how they play between the A and S